What is going on, IB Nation? It is Saturday, and we got a special edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast for you. I'm Vince D'Addario. That's Brian Driscoll. There's been a lot going on this week, and normally we do our depth chart breakdown on Tuesdays, and that's Brian and I are on Tuesday. We do our depth chart breakdown. We were going to do the corners this week, and then Brian was going to do the corners with Sean on Thursday. So we had a double commitment show on Tuesday. And then Jack Swarbrick decided that they were going to announce his succession program.
It was very rude.
Thursday.
Very rude and inconsiderate of Jack not to call us first and ask us what our show topic was going to be about.
Seriously, just inconsiderate, really.
I know, very much
what
so.
it is.
But I think maybe he was like, well, I didn't want to do it on the day of your mailbag.
Fair.
So okay, I'll let it slide this once.
Right. So we've got our depth chart breakdown of the corners today, and then we'll try to get back pending, breaking news and commitments, and I don't know, Father Jenkins stepping down or something. Obviously that's a joke. That's not happening.
Kind of. It's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Eventually.
But we're not predicting it next week.
So. But anyway, so we're going to get back to our normal schedule. We will have another depth chart breakdown on Tuesday. Brian and I will be here for that, and then we'll get back into the normal deal.
And we're going to go offense, defense, offense, defense,
right.
offense, defense. So obviously we did quarterbacks the first week. We did corners this week. What do we have on the docket next week, Vince? I think receivers is probably where I'm going to want to switch it to, even if we don't have it scheduled. But
I don't think we have it scheduled. We're just
definitely one I want to talk about sooner rather than later because of a lot of the conversations that are happening about the Notre Dame wide receivers and some of the misconceptions and things along those lines. And then, of course, we'll have a mailbag at the end of today. So,
of course,
rock and roll, man.
So, if you have mailbag questions, make sure you put the MB in front of it. That way, we can kind of tell what it is. We can get it started. I mean Brian, and we can make that happen. So we're ready to go for the mailbag at the end. But without further ado, let's jump into, Brian, one of the stronger position groups from top to bottom, I would say, on this team, especially on the defense, and that is the cornerback position.
It's very interesting, Vince, when you look at position groups and how they somewhat are cyclical on how strengths become weaknesses, weaknesses become strengths, and then everything in between. And it wasn't that long ago, I was looking at cornerback and running back, and it's just like, man, I don't know, man, about these positions, boy. I tell you what, they haven't recruited these positions well. And I mean, 2018, you're talking about those are two of your strengths as a football team. And then by 2020, they're two of your biggest question marks. I mean, it can happen really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows how important getting like one recruitment right can do for your program. If Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman and I and you were not correct about Benjamin Morrison, that was the only difference. We're having a different conversation right now.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's still, if the national analysts were right about him, he's still a good, solid player, 4-star, top 350 kind of guy. Whatever. That's not terrible by any stretch, but we're not sitting here talking about how, Notre Dame has a chance to have the best cornerback tandem in college football. And then the other cornerback is a guy that they recruited to play a different position, and how that's impacted it. Now you're starting to see the cornerback recruiting start to pick up even more. And you say, boy, this position that 2 years ago was a strength. Now a guy that started for you at cornerback in the college football playoff in 2020 is a guy that is just battling to be a backup at this point in time on this roster. And where is he going to be a backup? And it just goes to show how quickly they've been able to fix it. But it also goes to show that how important, sort of a big picture point, Vince, is how important recruiting and coaching is to a position. How quickly a position can go from a strength, a weakness to a strength, simply because A, you hired a guy who's one of the best in the business at coaching his position, and B, a guy that knows how to identify talent and then recruit talent and doesn't care about who you think is a 5-star, who you think is a 5-star, who you think is a 5-star. It's who I think is a 5-star.
Right.
And you look at his recent track record of identifying guys like Kobe Bryant, Ahmad Gardner, Benjamin Morrison, and you're just like, boy, this guy knows what he's doing. And it just shows how quickly the right hire can completely change a position group for the better and for worse. And I think cornerback is completely indicative of that, of of how hiring Mike Mickens and look, who did that? Brian Kelly did that, right? This is Marcus Freeman hire. Marcus Freeman kept him. And let's be honest, if Mike Mickens never came to Notre Dame before Marcus Freeman was hired, he would have hired him as his cornerback.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Of the relationship. But that was a Brian Kelly hire. It's one of the leftover hires from the Brian Kelly tenure that has worked out tremendously well. So kudos to Coach Kelly, who coached Mike Mickens at Cincinnati, obviously. But that one has really changed, Vince. And so we're going to talk a lot about the talent today. But it was very important at the beginning to talk about the job that Mike Mickens done because I feel like he got a lot of flack this time last year. He's got a lot to prove. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't think you guys understand how hard it was to have or how challenging it was and how good of a coaching job he had to do to get the cornerback room in 2020 good enough to play for a team to play for a championship.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure. No, it's funny. You mentioned the Marcus Freeman, Mike Mickens connection and then the Brian Kelly, Mike Mickens connection and all that. I wonder, and this is more of a hypothetical wondering, right? But I wonder, we had the whole, when Marcus Freeman was a free agent, everybody knew he was leaving Cincinnati. Was it going to be LSU? Was it going to be Notre Dame? There was a Mike Mickens piece of that puzzle, right? And I wonder, and I know, they opened up the bank and they, backed up the Brinks truck and they, did all of the things to get Marcus Freeman to come to Notre Dame. And I get all of that and I appreciate all of that. I wonder what percentage Mike Mickens had to do with Marcus Freeman coming to Notre Dame. Because I know that had to be part of the decision-making process.
I'm sure in the list of secondary categories, it played a role. And I do know that there were conversations between them about what it was like being in Notre Dame. And so I think that
had to have been, right?
That played a bigger role than, okay, Mick is there.
Well, just like his entire experience and what it's like.
Exactly.
And he trusts his opinion, obviously. And so, I wonder if he wasn't there as a sounding board for what is Notre Dame. If that would have made a difference in Marcus Freeman's decision.
It's definitely something to consider.
It's a hypothetical. Neither one of us really know the answer, but
the good news is they're both here.
Right.
And they're both still here. Absolutely. And Mike Mickens he's now also the pass game coordinator, which was something that kind of happened this offseason to help him get a little bit of a pay raise. But this is one of those coaches that you look at and say, whenever we talk about why it's important, why coaching matters.
Yeah.
This is, we always had kind of the Harry Hiestand example, but you're like, but that's offensive line, but in the last couple of years, we've now had multiple examples. Look what Chancey Stuck. Look at what a difference a year makes.
Oh,
and when we, a year ago, we don't know recruiting is finally getting going, but we don't know how good of a coach it's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. And a fast forward a year and a half, and all of a sudden Notre Dame is sitting here with an absolutely loaded receiver room for the future. And, the receiving core is expected, in my opinion, to be a lot better. And all because of what? Because of a coaching change. Cornerback. And not that Todd Light did a bad job. It's just he was kind of a new coach to this whole thing as well. And he helped with Troy Pride, Julian Love and all that. But it was kind of like they had gone through a period where there were some issues from a coaching staff standpoint. You're not getting the help from the head coach or defensive coordinator. It kind of wasn't as active as a recruiter as the previous defensive coordinators, all these different things. And it just kind of left you in a tough spot. You go out and you hire Mike Mickens, and he has to kind of deal with the consequences of those things for a couple of years. And you have to go out and get a Nick McLeod, because if you don't get Nick McLeod, your 2020 cornerback room is a mess.
He's top 3 of all time transfers at Notre Dame.
And it's a guy that went undrafted, right? So then you come out in 2021 and you've got your issues there. And then 22, it starts to finally take a step forward. And now we're sitting here reading preseason football magazines with the Notre Dame secondary in the top 10.
Yeah.
And it's not because of the safeties. Right. And so it has certainly come a long way. Mike Mickens deserves a ton of credit for that. And we'll certainly I love the Ohio State fan in the chat talking about how the Ohio State secondary coach deserves credit. Okay, guy, let's just chill out a little bit. All right. Sauce Gardner was a All-American as a true freshman before the current Ohio State coach ever showed up at Cincinnati to replace him. Let's pump the brakes on this Ohio State spin here. This is a Notre Dame channel, okay? Mike Mickens recruited him. Mike Mickens coached him to an All-American status before that dude ever showed up. All right, so let's chill out a little bit on that action. And now he's at Notre Dame. He coached Mike. He coaches Benjamin Morrison to another freshman All-American honor. And now it's about taking their games to the next level, because as we transition into sort of talking about this 1-2 punch of cornerback, the reality is, Vince, it was a very good duo last year. Both players had moments of brilliance. Both players had moments where, okay, you got to be better than that. And I think that's going to be the task for them as players, but also for Mike Mickens to say, how do we get this to the next level? Morrison, you can't rest on your laurels. You are a freshman All-American, not an All-American, right? Hey, Cam, you had moments where you were brilliant. How do we get to the next step? And that right there, Vince, is going to be what determines just how good this duo is going to be. It's not, if you repeat last year, you're good. You're good.
But you're not great.
But you're not great. You're not anchoring the defense.
That's the difference.
It's about building. That's going to be the key.
So let's talk about the projected starters. We'll kind of work our way through the depth chart. We'll start at the top, obviously. And as you said, Lindy's Magazine has the Notre Dame secondary 6th out of 10 of secondaries that they've highlighted, top to bottom. Some of them are a little suspect in my opinion, but that's a conversation for another day. The fact that Notre Dame is even mentioned has everything to do with Notre Dame's corners, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The starters, the projected starters. We've got Cam Hart. He's a fifth-year senior. I believe he's a junior in eligibility, which is crazy. So he could actually come back for another year, which is nuts all by itself. And then you've got Benjamin Morrison, who's an All-American, or freshman All-American, coming back, solidified that starting position. So these are the two guys we're going to talk about. Let's give the fifth-year senior his due credit. We'll talk about him first. Always been a huge Cam Hart fan. I think that, obviously the injury bug has plagued him. He was a candidate to leave after last year. I mean, he could have left. I think that he made the right decision, obviously, to come back. One of the things that we heard as to the reason that he's coming back is he thinks more balls are going to come his way because of the season that Benjamin Morrison had last year. I love that attitude. I love that attitude. He's like, I need to prove to everybody that I am the guy. I can be the guy. I can be the leader of this secondary. And I can obviously also, in the meantime, up my draft status and all of those things. But he's got a lot of confidence in who he is. And I love that about Cam Hart.
Well, and the injury obviously helped as well. I mean, that played a role as well in his decision. But I think it's also something where he needs it from a developing his game standpoint. I mean, that's the other part of it too, is I realize he could go to the NFL and maybe go somewhere and do some different things. But the reality is his game still needs work, and his game still needs to see improvement in a lot of different areas. And so when I look at it, Vince, it's one of those things where with Cam, you like normally put it like this, normally fifth-year seniors don't see like big jumps. It's like, okay, it's like some little minor tweaks, but the difference between him and most fifth-year seniors is the fact that he didn't play cornerback for most of, for early part of his career. He played receiver as a freshman. Then, of course, his first full year at cornerback is the COVID year where you missed the entire offseason.
Sure.
And so he is still learning from a lot of those different aspects of it. And those are going to be things that you look at and say, hey, this guy is a chance to be a big-time player. Here's the question. What becomes the more common aspect of it? Is it the misplaying of routes, getting grabby against Ohio State when he didn't need to, missing assignments against North Carolina, some of those things? Or is it the guy that in the second half of the year was just a complete lockdown cornerback?
Right.
Those are the things that we're going to have to figure out and say, hey, which one can you be this season? And I think those are the things that you look at and say, hey, look, what like when you look at Cam, Vince, it's just one of those things where he's kind of a bit of an enigma, right? Because he gets overlooked for a lot of ways and part of it is because he has those just, wow, what were you thinking there, Cam? You know what I mean? Like that's not you. And they kind of, and Troy Pride was like this to a degree. He would have that one or two plays a game where you're like, oh, dude. And that's all that people that watch on TV.
That's all they ever saw. Yeah, right.
And they don't see like this dude was like putting on clamps on people.
So I nobody ever threw his direction.
Right.
Like that, people need
It's
to
like,
understand
why do you think
that.
people kept throwing at Benjamin Morrison?
Right.
Right. I mean,
He
it's
was
because
the lesser of two evils on that. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
So, but that's the thing is like Cam's got to be that guy all the time. Now, here's what Cam has: supreme confidence in himself,
Yep.
exceptional athleticism. From what I've been told by sources at Notre Dame, he's a consistent 4.4 runner. You hear other players talk about fastest guys on the team; they always talk about him as one of those guys, you know. And I still remember the Florida State game. Remember when that running back broke free, and like Kyle Hamilton's in chase mode, and then Cam Hart goes like whoop, like just sprints by Kyle Hamilton.
Right.
Like that should have been key number one, that the people that told us he was running a 4.3, his agent people and the people he was working at were like, oh, he's a 4.3. We're like, well, then Cam Hart's a 4.19, if that's true.
Just watch the film, baby.
Yeah. But I mean, look, he's long, he's fluid, he's, you know, for his size, he's fluid, he can change direction well. It's just about improving his game. And so that's the thing we'll talk about is what are the areas that Cam needs to improve his game. Number one, he needs to, not only does his technique's actually not that bad, I don't think he trusts his technique as much as he needs to. And I think that's why at times, especially the first 5-6 games, he get grabby at the top of routes. We saw this against Ohio State when they were thrown at him deep. They do an incomplete once and then had a pass interference. And the thing is, like, he would kind of start grabbing at him instead of just running. It's like, dude, you're as fast as they are. Just run. You've got length. That's a guy that doesn't trust his technique for two reasons. One is just still not fully bought in. But the other two things, Vince, is he's dealing with a hamstring injury. And I don't think in that game he trusted his body. But even if you go watch the Stanford game, there were times you're just like, dude, why are you reacting that way at the top end of that route? Like, that guy's not going to beat you. Trust your technique more. The more he did that second half of the year, the better he was. That's going to be a big part of it. And that was something that was interesting at one of the practices we were at, Vince. They were out there, the cornerbacks were out there, and Mickens had them wearing oven mitts in practice.
Really?
Seriously.
That.
He had them wear, it was the second full open period. I don't think you were able to be at that one. But they were literally out there with black oven mitts on, going in one-on-ones and going through routes with receivers.
I love that.
Because it's like, I don't stop grabbing, right? Trust your technique, trust your feet, trust your hand placement, trust the angle, trust leverage, all those different things. Use your hands, because in coverage, you want to use your forearms, not your hands.
Right.
Because your hands will get you in trouble. Mm-hmm. Use your forearms more so. But then use your hands. And when you use your hands, which using your hands is important as well, but you got to know when to use them. Don't grab.
Right.
And so that's to me, that's smart coaching. And I know other really good defensive back coaches do that as well. But with Cam, that's the biggest thing, Vince, beyond, I mean, okay, stay healthy. All right, move on.
Well, sure.
You know that.
Right.
But when it comes to it, it's just that consistency of technique. I thought his focus early in the season last year also got a little bit wonky at times. And I think that's because he put a lot of pressure on himself to go out there and be the dude.
Sure.
And I think that's when Benjamin Morrison really started to thrive. I think that is when Cam started to thrive, because he realized, like, dude, I don't have to do this all by myself.
Right.
Like, and I think that's a big part of the reason he came back. So it's just the consistency of focus. I don't question his effort, ever question his effort. Consistency from a technical standpoint, but then just trusting yourself, trusting your coaching, and trusting your technique. That's the difference between Cam Hart being a really good player at times and one of the best cornerbacks in college football.
And see, the trusting of the technique and is different than just being confident, right? Because in the moment, you have to be able to trust what your body is doing. You have to trust your technique, and it has nothing to do with being confident, right? You can be confident going into a game and not trust your technique, right? Those are kind of two different things. I wanted to clarify that. And then also, that is kind of to be expected since he came to Notre Dame as a wide receiver. And he's been learning pretty much on the go how to be a corner, and he's developed into arguably one of the best corners on the team and in the country, right? As long as he is consistent. And so I'm not overly surprised that, you know, there's a lack of trust in his technique and some things like that in the moment, because he's still fresh. Like it's still fresh and new for him to be working at this level and to be doing what he's doing. And considering that he is who he is at this point from where he's come from when he stepped foot on Notre Dame's campus, I think he's made huge leaps. And I think that he's in a great position But this year is all about, okay, you've had your time, you've learned, you have your technique. Now it's time to trust your technique in the biggest moments. Can he do that? That's a huge question mark right now, right? And it's not one that I don't think is going to get answered, because I do think it's going to get answered. I think it's going to get answered in a positive way. But that's where we are right now, right? I mean, we need to see empirical evidence that he can go an entire season trusting his technique and being that dude. Because if that is the case, if you're an offense, you pick your poison. Are you going to go towards Cam Hart, who's been this consistent big body guy, lockdown corner, or are you going to go to Benjamin Morrison, who's the freshman All-American, and all he does is pick balls off? Like, pick your poison, folks. And as a Notre Dame fan, as an analyst, you're like, you just kind of sit back and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I'll make a statement that a lot of people might not agree with. If you look at the entirety of the season, Cam Hart was their best cornerback last year for the entirety of the season. Now, Benjamin made his presence felt immediately. He had a big pass breakup against Ohio State. He was very good in coverage against Ohio State. And I think we talked, I know you and I at least talked about this, but I'm pretty sure we talked about this after the game about, hey, looks like we might be right about that dude. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he gave up his completions. He gave up a big play against Cal. He gave up a touchdown against Syracuse. He had his moments in early in the season as well. Now, by the end of the year, he was their most impactful corner. But that was, again, partly why, like, we think of the Clemson game, right? And Benjamin Morrison was brilliant in that game. But we forget who made the first two big plays of that game on the very first. Who set the tone for the defense on the first, 2 plays of the game? It was Cam Hart. Just blowing up a perimeter on the perimeter RPOs, blowing up RPOs. And he made a tackle for loss, and he got held on another because he beat the guy so bad. He held him, and it just completely took all the wind out of Clemson sails, right? So for a good chunk of the year, Benjamin Morrison was not their best cornerback. Cam Hart was. Now the key for that is, okay, Cam, can you be that guy week after week after week? That's going to be the big question for Cam Hart.
Yep,
and if he can, and if he can stay healthy, it's going to be one of those situations where he's not the complement to Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison's not the complement to him. They are like Cincinnati had, with the guys that Mike Mickens recruited, where you don't really have a choice. Hey, maybe you might want to try throwing out our safeties today because you ain't doing this against our corners. And the freedom that could give Al Golden and the ability to be more aggressive and take more chances because you have corners that can hold their own against anybody on the perimeter. That's going to be the key. And so we expect them to be that 9 out of 10 games. The question is going to be, can they play like one of the best corner tandems in the country against the Buckeyes?
Right.
Can they do it against Duke? Can they do it against USC? Can they do it against Clemson? Those are the games where we're going to really find out if these guys are among the best in the country or if they're just better than most of the people that they play.
Sure.
Those are going to be the games that determine that. And Cam's going to play a huge role in that because the way that some of these teams play, the field guy's just going to naturally get tested more because of the quick game, the perimeter screen games, things like that. And he's going to have to be a force. And that's where his game really took off last year, Vince, is he was very good in perimeter run and screen support. That was one of the strengths of his games from day one. Now it's about being more consistent in coverage.
He's not afraid to stick his nose in. He's never been afraid to stick his nose in, and he's a very willing tackler. And it's a godsend from the cornerback position, because that's not always the case, right? I mean, especially in college football. You need a corner that's willing to stick his nose in there and at the very, 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 very least, funnel everything back to the inside, if not make the play yourself, right? You have to be willing to do that. So that's always been a big plus for Cam Hart and something that I've really enjoyed watching him do, to be honest with you. And kind of a transition. Let's talk about the other side of things. You've got a returning freshman All-American, Benjamin Morrison, obviously getting a lot of love in the preseason by a lot of different publications. Deservedly so, obviously. And we just got done talking about Cam Hart sticking his nose in there. Nobody sticks their nose in there better than Benjamin Morrison. He didn't quite have the rear end to take some of those shots, it felt like, as a freshman. But I'm excited to see kind of his maturation process in the weight room and all of that as he sticks his nose in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's willing. He's a willing tackler, right? That's the key. He's a willing tackler, and he was strong for a freshman.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Right, but he's going to have to get stronger. But look, where Benjamin Morrison wasn't a freshman All-American because he's a willing tackler. He was a freshman All-American because he's excellent in coverage. And a lot of times, Vince, when a guy has a lot of interceptions, it can kind of mask a guy that maybe wasn't that good in other areas. Like he made a lot of interceptions because people kept picking on him because he's not that good. His numbers don't reflect that. And we've talked about this in the past. I mean, his numbers are outstanding, and no matter how you slice it, right? I mean, when you look at him and Cam Hart last year, and you look at their numbers, right? And so what do we always say? Pro Football Focus: ignore their grades, look at their data. Yes. Their data is excellent.
Data good, grade bad.
Yes. And so when you look at the two, Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison last year. Cam Hart allowed opponents to complete 50% of their passes. That's it. 22 of 44 for 240 yards. And then Benjamin Morrison got thrown at 51 times and also allowed 22 completions for a 43.1% completion rate. Now, he gave up one touchdown all year. That's it. And he did that against, if you remember, against Syracuse. And talking to people at Notre Dame, that was on them. They told him to play that route wrong. And so he's backpedaling, and Oronde Gadsden just beats him easily inside on a post. Well, that's still a touchdown given up on him.
Sure.
And that was the only one he gave up all year. And so he had 6 interceptions, I think 4 pass breakups, and gave up 1 touchdown. And he had as many touchdowns as he allowed, if you want to put it that way.
That's a good point.
So he got that touchdown back last year against Clemson. And so I think the thing for Benjamin is it's obviously get stronger. That's going to help him a ton, because I think when you look at when did he get beat last year? A couple times he got beat vertically because he got out muscled for the ball. A guy kind of shoved him off the route and outplayed him for the football.
It's because he was 18.
Right.
I mean,
and so that's going to be a key for him is just being that, and then also just being more consistent with his technique. And then the only thing that I'm really concerned about Benjamin Morrison is, and this is I don't know him, so I don't. This is a concern this isn't personal about Benjamin Morrison. This isn't, I know this kid and I'm really worried about this. This is true of any kid that has a tremendous success as a freshman. Do you rest on your laurels, or do you say, okay, I was a freshman All-American next year, but I want more next year?
Right.
And we're going to find out what kind of attitude he has in that regard. And so that's really my big question for Benjamin. Get stronger, play the deep ball all year like you did late. Right. I mean, late in the year, he played the deep ball much better than he did early in the middle of the year. Play the deep ball better, be more physical when you need to be, but also stay hungry, keep something to prove. That's going to be the key. Yeah. And so the tools are clearly there, Vince. We know this. It's just going to be about, can he take his game to the next level? But at the very minimum, I just need him to repeat what he did last year. Right. The only thing that we really need from Benjamin Morrison is just don't have a sophomore slump.
Don't regress.
If he doesn't make a huge jump, all right, that's fine. He was pretty good second half of the year. It's just don't regress. Mm-hmm. Now it's about, okay, now can Cam Hart be more consistent? Because if you look at how the way they played together down the stretch, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And the good thing is they're going to have at least 2 games to kind of get their feet wet a little bit against Navy and Tennessee State, where, look, Navy's going to test you with Cam Hart gave up a big play against Navy last year. One of the few big plays he gave up last year was against Navy, where he got caught peeking in the backfield, had a little kind of bumped into one of his guys, and then the goal guy runs by him. Those are the things that Cam has to eliminate, right? And then they didn't play Benjamin early, brought him in the second half, and he played great. Hopefully they don't make that mistake again. By not playing him. And as you'll read it, we actually have an article at irishbreakdown.com by Sean Stiers, where it was from the interview he did with the guy that covers Navy. Navy's going to change their offense a little bit. They're still saying they're going to run the triple option, but they're going to throw the ball more. They're going to
be a little.
They're going to use the tight end more. It's going to look a lot different. And so your corners are going to have to play better, and even more is going to be put on them when you're facing Navy now. And so your corners are going to have. So they're going to get tested, but again, you're not playing Marvin Harrison,
right? And
Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate and Julian Fleming and Brandon Ennis and Noah Rogers and Keon Graves and all those other guys, right? It's not that. So you're going to have some games to kind of build up to that, where you're not just being thrown into that fire in game one. And I think that should help the Notre Dame cornerbacks kind of get up to speed with that. And the other thing that should help them too this year, Vince, is I think that the offensive receiver position is so much better this year, which should help test them more. And we saw that in the spring.
Yeah.
And we'll see that even more in the summer and fall.
Good call. I don't think people think about that as much, about what they're seeing at practice as opposed to in the past. I mean, a year ago right now, the competition just wasn't there at practice. Let's just put it that way, right? And that has obviously changed for the better for Notre Dame, and offensively and defensively. So
that's right.
So those are the two guys that obviously are getting the accolades. Those are the guys that obviously Notre Dame is counting on, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and those are guys who are going to determine if this position group is going to be elite. They can't be elite without these two. They can still be somewhat elite if everything else goes perfect. If the rest of it doesn't, but the rest of it is going to play a very important role, especially if there's an injury or one of these guys doesn't step up. Or let's be honest about something else too, Vince. Playing a lot of teams like Total Football this year.
Well, exactly. And so, let's also be very clear here. You have to rotate your corners. I mean, that's just the reality of college football for the most part. I mean, depth guys are going to have to be involved.
Can I say one thing?
Sure. No.
I'm very curious how the new rules are going to impact that.
Yes, that's a good call with the clock not stopping.
In two regards.
Like
Number one is the clock not stopping. How does that impact teams on offense rotating in the middle of the series, which then could impact corner play? But then number two, how does it impact the pace of the game?
Sure.
And the number of plays you play in a game.
Sure.
Now, I still think it's good to rotate your corners in most games. You're not going to do it against Ohio State, ideally. You're not going to do it against USC, ideally. But can you do it against NC State and Central Michigan and Tennessee State and Duke and Louisville and it not hurt you? That's going to be the question.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're going to find out. And I know, Vince, that there's one guy in particular that we have our eye on for this.
Well, and a year ago right now, the freshman sensation coming out of spring practice was Jaden Mickey. And he was the one that everybody was talking about, rightfully so. Had a great spring last year. More on the early side than the later side, but still a great spring for a early enrollee freshman. So everybody was talking about Jaden Mickey and what he was going to be able to do. He hit a little bit of a freshman wall, I would say, a little bit, but at the same time, he was also overshadowed by Benjamin Morrison, who we just talked about.
Right.
I mean, that definitely played a role in it as well. But sophomore season for Jaden Mickey is going to be a huge, huge year for him because he's right there. He's the next guy in, essentially. He's your sixth man at the cornerback position. So what is he going to bring to the table? And has he had an opportunity to kind of take that next step and be a guy who got a lot of playing time last year, but can he be more consistent moving forward?
Well, that's what we'll find out, right? And the encouraging thing is that he did play well this spring. I thought he played very well this spring. I think what happened to Jaden early is not that his confidence was shot, because I don't think his confidence got shot. I just think putting him in the situation they did against Ohio State, where he got beat for the touchdown, I think kind of messed with his head a little bit.
Sure.
And then it also messed with them a little bit to where they weren't allowing him to come up and play as aggressively in coverage and do some of those things. So he was getting a lot of passes completed on him right in front of him. Like you watch the USC game and they're just catching stop routes right in front of them because they're just bailing them.
Right.
Like that shows me you have no faith in your corner. So how can you expect him to have faith in you or himself when you're not showing faith in him?
Sure.
And I understand that he was put into a tough situation, having to replace Cam Hart, who had gotten hurt the game before. So Jaden comes out, he's got a new number, he's got number 7 on, and I thought he played good football. I think the big thing for Jaden Mickey is he is a pretty good athlete, but he's not an elite athlete. And I would argue that Benjamin Morrison's not an elite athlete either. He's not a 4.3 guy and those type. He's not going to jump 42 inches at the combine. He's a very good athlete. But the thing about Benjamin Morrison is he's incredibly technically proficient. And I think the thing with Jaden is because he's not an elite athlete, meaning he's not 6'2.5", like in a 4.4 like Cam Hart. Cam Hart can make mistakes and still make a play or still cover a guy because he's 6'2.5", almost 6'3", and runs a 4.4 and has super long arms.
Sure.
Right? When Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison make technical mistakes, they get hurt. And with Benjamin, he just didn't make a ton. I mean, notice we didn't talk a lot about Benjamin needs to improve his technique during that session. Now, of course, he does to a degree. Every freshman needs to get better.
Sure.
And so, like, defending the deep ball, he's got to do a better job there. But overall, his technique is very sound. Jaden was for a freshman had solid technique, but when it compares to you got to go cover the other team's best receivers, Vince, his technique would get him in trouble at times.
Right.
And I think that they put a little too much on him early because he's very smart. And this is a mistake that I think coaches make with really smart freshmen is they forget, yes, this kid's really smart, but he's still a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And then game one, you're going to put him in a one-on-one situation over the middle of the field after the other team saw that your starter went down and you're in a timeout. And it just was on the coaches to me more than Jay.
And we all saw that one coming a mile away because we talked about it in the timeout. Remember that? Right. We were sitting in the press box. We're like, they're going right at him, right at 21. And they did. But that, again, like you said, that's good coaching. I mean, on Ohio State's side, that's good coaching.
Right.
And on Notre Dame side, that's not good coaching. You didn't protect your freshmen in the first game of the season, and that's unfortunate for sure. But so they can't make that mistake again.
Right. Now, we're going to find out if Jaden is able to improve his game as well. Because it's not all on the coaching. Like his that play was, but overall his freshman season was not on the coaches. And that's not, I know that's not what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
So what does Jaden got to do to improve? Maintain your confidence. It's great. I love that you love the talk. I love that you're confident. That's fine. Sure. Don't change a thing. But now you've got to go back it up. And how do you back it up? You back it up with consistent play, consistent technique, efficient footwork, being stronger, which is something all the freshmen need to get better at. And the other thing too is understand your role in the scheme. And the problem that Jaden had, and this is something we talked about last spring because we saw this happen to him a couple times, is he's too aggressive. Mm-hmm. And he'll take that first bite and he'll jump on it. And that's the thing that I liked in the spring game, Vince, and not even the play that he intercepted the pass. That was just a bad ball. But in the other concepts where they went after him, it's like he trusted his technique. He stayed within the system. He didn't try to make a play. You make a play by not trying to make a play. You make a play by staying within the framework of the scheme and trusting your technique. And then if the ball comes, then you make a play on the ball. Not trying to anticipate, gee, I think they're going to throw a hitch here, because you may get it right one time, but the next time they're running a pump and go and you're giving up a 60-yard touchdown. The pass breakup the first time wasn't worth it to give up a 60-yarder the second time.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so those are areas where he's going to have to improve. Now, his game is that of this year is going to be that of more of a field corner, most likely. But I could see a scenario where he has to play a little bit of both. And I think he is going to be a key to Notre Dame being able to go out and rotate a corner.
Exactly.
And be able to maintain a high level of play. Because the more Jaden Mickey can come in and as a rotation guy and you don't miss a beat, and you're going to have to alter your coverage because you're not going to ask him to do exactly what Cam Hart's doing.
And you got to be smart about it.
And Benjamin Morrison's doing. But if he can come in and, let's say, give you, 15 snaps as the field, maybe 10 as the boundary, all of a sudden he gets 25 snaps a game. That's pretty good. But you now took 15 snaps a game off of Cam Hart's, shoulders, literally. And so that's the thing is, and then if you can do that in 9 games, maybe some games you're even getting 20 snaps because maybe, you're pulling away and Cam can come off the field for 20, 30 snaps. And because of the fourth quarter, you're up big. Now, all of a sudden his legs are fresh when the team from Columbus comes to town. And then his legs are fresh when the team from LA comes to town. And then his legs are fresh when you head down to Clemson, South Carolina.
Sure.
Right. And that's going to be key. And it's partly you're as a team blowing people out when you need to, but it's also can Jaden Mickey come in? But here's the reality, Vince. That all sounds great. But if your cornerback isn't, if there's a big gap in play, you just can't afford to do that against any opponent worth anything. That's the NC States, the Dukes, the Louisvilles, the Wake Forest, the Pitts. You're not going to be able to put Jaden Mickey in there for more than a couple plays here and there if he's not able to play at a high level. And that's
he has to. I mean, he has to step up, but that's the unknown. And we kind of, during pregame here, we kind of put together like when we're going to talk about guys, he's in a category all by himself. And there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? There's a reason for that based on what he was able to do last year and what we think he's going to be capable of doing this year, being kind of the first guy in relief of the two guys we just talked about. And the first two guys we talked about, we're talking about them at, All-American status, like top 6, top 5, top 10, cornerback duos in the country. So, that's going to be there's a big opportunity for Jaden Mickey in his true sophomore season to prove his worth in this secondary, in a very good secondary, right? And I'm not saying this is his last chance. This is not necessarily his last opportunity, but there's talent behind him. And so this is his best opportunity, not his last, but his best.
Oh, sure. He's going to get
really
plenty of
establish
opportunities.
himself.
It's just the focus. The reason there's a stress on the focus is not because, if he doesn't do it this year, he's never going to get another chance. It's they need him to be that guy this year.
Absolutely. Yes.
And they need him to come in and be effective and be a guy that can handle coverage. I mean, that's the thing, is not just coming to play zone and don't get beat, but can you come in and make plays? That's the question, Vince. Can Jaden come in and make plays?
Right.
And they're going to need him to do that. And if he can, he's going to have a big impact this year. If he can't, then all of a sudden the drop off between 1 and 2, and then between your 1s, I should say, and then your 2s is going to be too great to where, hey Cam, we need you. We can't afford you to come off the field against Ohio State.
Yeah,
you can't afford to have you come off the field against USC because we know where they're going to go with the ball.
That's a tough position to be in.
If you do that, that's fine. I mean, that's corners did that for a long time, right? Corners never came off the field for a long time, but it's just in today's game, when teams are rotating receivers more and they're throwing all these different things at you, that little second of, man, my legs are tired, is what gets you beat in the fourth quarter, right? And so if you can not be in that situation, and Cam's fresh in the fourth quarter, and Benjamin's fresh in the fourth quarter,
even better,
then you're in a much, much better situation. So Jaden Mickey's going to have a very important role for Notre Dame this year. There's no doubt about it. He's got the confidence for it, Vince.
No doubt.
It's just he's not a real big guy. He's like, about 5'11". He's got okay length, not elite length. He just cannot afford to not be in the right position.
Yeah.
And again, he's not unathletic by any stretch. He's a good athlete, but because he's not really big and he's not an elite athlete, there's just nothing great about him tools-wise. That's why he has to use this and this at a high level. And when he does that, he's fine. I mean, we've seen and here's the thing too, Vince, we're not resting on his high school film and saying, gee, we hope that freshman guy can be back. We've seen him do it in practice. We've seen him do it at times in games. We saw him do it in the spring game. It's like, hey, give me that guy right there more often. That's going to be the key. And that's sort of a story with a lot of these corners, is like, we know the tools are there. We've seen you do it in a Notre Dame uniform. Now I just need you to do it consistently. And that's going to be the key for him this season. And the better he plays, the more confidence that they're going to have in him. Because, look, he's going to play in games, Vince, right? The question is, do they just go, okay, Jaden's in, let's play off ball. Let's just play zone to that side. We'll give up a hitch route. We'll buzz it. We'll do some different things. We'll protect him. Or when he's in there, do you say, okay, we're going to just keep doing what we're doing because we know this kid can handle it. And we know, hey, if I got to go cover 1 or cover 0 when Jaden's in the game, that's cool because he can do it too. Yeah. That's going to be the difference. Or, man, I'd like to go, it's 3rd and 5. I'd like to go, cover 0 here with this blitz we locked. But, man, Cam's on the sideline and Jaden's in the game and Jaden can't handle that. Well, I guess we're going to have to go zone. All of a sudden, they complete a little short route, and then they just put that drive together. They need Jaden to be able to say, hey, coach, whatever you wanted to call here, call because I got this. And that's going to be the key. And the more he can do that, obviously the better he's going to be and the better the cornerback position group is going to be. But he, to me, is the starters have to be good for this to be an elite group. But to really put yourself in the echelon of, hey, we have the best cornerback rotation in the country or one of the 2 or 3, it's got to be more than just the starters. And he's going to be – and he's not the only one, but he's a big piece of that conversation.
Yep. And speaking of the other guys who are in the mix for that position, first of all, can I just say that makes me feel old. It's like when you're talking about your kids or you're talking about whatever, the fact that Ryan Barnes and Chance Tucker are going into their junior year, which means they're going into their 3rd year on campus. It seems hard to believe for me, Brian. It feels like they just got here. I remember going to practice and seeing Ryan Barnes for the first time and thinking, man, that kid is long. You know what I mean? Like, I just remember him being like the new kid on the block, so to speak. And now he's going into his 3rd year. And, he and Chance Tucker this is an opportunity for these guys to really solidify themselves within this depth chart. Like, we're not looking for them to be starters, but if something goes wrong, one or both of these guys is going to have to step up. And that is a big question mark for me as far as where this secondary is. Now, look, if nobody gets hurt and everything's good, I'm good, right? But if we're talking a game or two or whatever, where one of these guys is going to have to step up, it's a big question mark for me. Ryan Barnes, Chance Tucker, are they ready for a significant role increase on this team? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I think Chance is ahead of Ryan right now. I think Ryan makes the flashier plays.
Sure, absolutely.
The problem with Ryan is he's going into his junior year, and the biggest football issue he's had is not gone away. And that is, you'll have 3 or 4 great plays and then just one complete blown assignment. You know, getting beat by Matt Salerno for the touchdown in the spring game. That was just bad technique, not doing what you're supposed to do, and then you give up a touchdown. That's going to be the thing for Ryan is can he eliminate? He's got length, he can run, he is physical, he can make plays on the football. But it's Vince, it's man, hey, great series, and then the next series you go out and you blow coverage on 3rd and 5, you get caught peeking in the backfield on 2nd and 10, and the guy throws the ball over your head. Next thing you know, it's the other team's band is playing. Those are the things where you just look at and say, hey, man, this is the stuff you have got to eliminate. And the key to Ryan Barnes getting a chance to be in the rotation and make an impact at Notre Dame, which he can physically, he has the tools to do.
Sure.
It's going to be very much about you've got to be more disciplined in how you go about your business every day.
Right.
And that's going to be a big part of the thing for Ryan. The tools are there, Vince. The other question is, okay, where does he play? Is he a field guy? Is he a nickel? Is he boundary? He's kind of played all over. And so he's got a lot of questions to answer. And, we talk about, somebody in the chat said, what would a make or breakout, what would a breakout year for Ryan Barnes look like? Well, I would say it's a make or break season for Ryan Barnes. And what would a breakout look like? It would mean Ryan's been consistent from an execution standpoint, which means he becomes a jack of all trades and he can play anywhere. Because Ryan's one of those unique players, Vince, that he has the skills to play field because he's long and rangy, like Cam Hart. He's got the physicality and coverage instincts to play boundary because of the length and the speed and the strength. But he's also a guy that we've seen play nickel, and he's a guy that can come up and be a really strong run supporter in the nickel. He's a guy that can come up and be physical against tight ends. He's got the size and length to play tight ends. If, like, you're playing a Georgia type of team, and you're like, man, when Georgia is with Georgia and their tight ends, it's a challenging matchup because they can be in their run sets, and you still got to cover this long, fast guy at tight end. And if you've got your 3 linebackers in the field, you're in trouble. But then if you go nickel, they're going to run on you. Well, a guy like Ryan Barnes, if he's playing at the top of his game, can help you there because he gives you a physical nickel presence against the run and some of those other things. But he's also someone who's long enough and strong enough to where he's not going to just get manhandled by a tight end either. But the problem is again, the consistency. So what would a make or break year look like for Ryan Barnes? He's a consistent football player that just forces his way onto the field. Mm-hmm. That's the key.
Absolutely.
Then Chance Tucker, Vince, is the other guy that is in a position to me. And I thought of the two, he had the best spring because he had the more consistent spring for me. And I think Chance is a guy we don't talk a lot about, but a guy that I think could be a guy that, is a boundary guy. He could be that guy and the boundary that you say if he steps up, he can do for Benjamin Morrison what we just got done talking about Jaden Mickey potentially doing as a field corner with Cam Hart.
Yeah, Ryan Barnes is more of a, how do I want to put this? Not a silent assassin. That doesn't necessarily work here, but he's just a guy that's not going to make the flashy plays. So you don't necessarily, if you're not looking for him, you don't recognize what he's doing. Does that make sense? Like that's how I feel about Chance Tucker. It's like he's there, he's doing the right thing.
Sexy. He's not a sexy player.
Not, yeah. And he's not a kid who is going to jump off the page at you when you're watching FSA.
Because he doesn't do a lot of this.
Right, exactly. He's just there. He's just doing his job. And he could find a role within this secondary, exactly like you just said, a chance to get Benjamin Morrison a series off to kind of recoup, get ready to get back out there kind of a situation.
Right.
If he can do that, if that ends up being his role, he gets a series in the first half, he gets a series in the second half,
or maybe a couple in the first half, depending on if you're playing a team that goes tempo, right?
And a significant role like on special teams, that kind of a thing. That's a win if you're a Chance Tucker fan. I think that is a spot where he can find his niche and really help this team. And when you say, oh, well, he only played, 15 plays on defense and was a special team stalwart, that's a really important position to play on this Notre Dame team. And so that's a place where he can kind of carve out where he needs to be. And I think that's a really important spot for him. I think he can do it. I really do. I think he can do it. But again, and you've heard this word a lot with a lot of the guys that we're talking about. It's about consistency. He needs to be consistent. He doesn't need to necessarily make the flashy plays. I'm not expecting that from him, but I need him to be more consistent.
Yes, be in the place you need to be in.
Right.
Don't give up big plays. People are going to go at you. Right. They're going to take shots at you. Because look, when they see number 20 is not on the boundary and number 18 is, they're going to go at you.
Of course.
Hold your water. Be sound with your technique. He's another guy that's got to keep getting stronger, right? Because Chance is in that weird class because that whole group lost like a year of development. That whole 2021 class, guys that were freshmen 21, most of them, like Ryan Barnes, missed his senior year. Chance got a spring ball chance in California. It was like 3 games.
I was going to say, it was
but
so
they missed
limited.
Like months of development.
Yeah.
They couldn't work out. They couldn't lift. They couldn't do all those kind of things. So they're kind of a year behind from a development standpoint in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And so you're seeing them hopefully, this is a projection, hopefully kind of hit their peak maybe a little later than you'd expect of a cornerback, meaning junior seasons. But it's understandable because when you consider the missed opportunities they had. And then, of course, because of the way the depth chart was ahead of them, they didn't get a lot of playing time the last 2 years. So Chance is a guy that's got to get stronger, and he's got to be – but he was – again, we saw limited opportunities this spring, but when I saw Chance this spring, and you saw it in the blue gold game, he just is steady.
Yeah.
Right? And he's smooth. I think that somewhat masks. He has solid speed. He's not a burner, but he's got solid speed. He had good track times, but he's just smooth and fluid. He's not a guy you're just going to run by with ease. That's just the reality of it.
Sure.
But he's also a guy that is – and here's the thing with these corners. The difference between like a Cam Hart, and we're going to talk about Christian Gray here in a second, is they're guys that are really fast that can get – in Micah Bell that can get away with certain things because they're really fast. All the guys in between from Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, Ryan Barnes, Chance Tucker, they're not burners. So they can't afford to have footwork mistakes when they're transitioning against a go route or a post route. They can't afford to, overplay on a lean out on a post route because they don't have the recovery speed to get back on it. Right. And those are the things where that's why consistency is so important for those guys, trusting the technique, and why a guy like Mike Mickens is so important because there's a level of confidence that they're going to get there now that they do get this whole offseason with Coach Mickens. And so that's why I'm confident that you're going to see – I thought Chance had a nice sort of breakout-ish type of performance this spring.
Solid.
Now, can you build on that and become that more dependable player after battling all summer against Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas and Tobias Merriweather and guys like that, Jaden Greathouse and Braylon James and Rico Flores?
Right.
Can you build on that? And if you can, now all of a sudden you're now rolling 4 deep. Right. And in most games. Now, you may not be 4 deep against Ohio State, right? Like if Marvin Harrison's playing the boundary I love Chance Tucker, but I don't want to take my All-American off the field in that particular game. But if my All-American is fresh because Chance could take 15 away from him in the 4 previous games, then I'm feeling really good about, where my guys' legs. I mean, again, they're going to play Ohio State September 23rd. That's going to be game 5 for Notre Dame.
Crazy.
You run the risk of them wearing down really soon.
Sure.
That's the reality of it. It's because you're playing 5 games in the hottest period of the year. Like that can wear on you. Absolutely. And so against Navy, against Tennessee State, against NC State, against Central Michigan, if your backups can't force their way, hey, coach, put me in. Did you not see me lock dudes down all week? I got this. Then you're gonna wear down quick. And then by the time USC comes to town, your guys don't have the legs.
Right.
And so the fact that Notre Dame does start a week sooner, the fact that they're going to spend a whole month of camp and the whole first 5 games of the year during the hot period, if they can't get breathers, you're going to be in trouble. But you also can't give them breathers if those other guys aren't ready. So they may not get a lot of the attention, but there's a reason we're talking as much about Jaden Mickey and Chance Tucker and Ryan Barnes as we are about the starters.
Mm-hmm.
Because the nature of the game today, the nature of the specific nature of their schedule and the realities of when they play and the teams they play means your depth better be as good as your starters in a lot of ways, at least in the time that they're on the field. And I have a feeling that this is a little bit of a prediction that Chance is going to be a surprise player for Notre Dame this year as sort of that really key, reserve player that's going to say, hey, teams are going to go at him early and he's going to make them pay for it. And I just kind of have that feeling about him this year.
Bold,
so we're
bold predictions are for the end, Brian.
Yeah.
Bold predictions.
It's not really a bold prediction.
All
That's
right.
more of an observational prediction.
All right.
How about that?
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's funny that you mentioned that. And I flipped over to the schedule real quick. They're going to have, because you make a good point about the heat of the year, or, the hottest part of the year and all that. They're going to have half their regular season schedule played by the time October 1st hits. 6 games are within August and September. 6. That's
because they play Duke on the 30th, right?
Yeah. Yes. They have
That's
6 games, Brian, before the calendar turns to October. Half the schedule is going to be done. That's and I realize they play in week 0, but there's 5 weekends in September, the way the calendar falls. So you're going to have 6 games done by the time you get to October. That's nutty to me. Because it doesn't even feel like football season until October to me. Like that's when it's like they're in the thick of it, but they're going to have half their schedule done.
But it's like if you can get through the Ohio State game, Vince.
Sure.
Those next 2 teams are going to be challenges before USC. But it's kind of like if you could get through Ohio State unscathed, you're in a situation where that's the period of time when your younger players start being more ready to give you minutes.
Sure.
Then you've also, of course, you have 2 buys. So if once you get through USC, you got a bye week. So if then you're going to have another bye week, 2-3 weeks later, right? 3 weeks later, another bye week. So you've got to survive the early period of the season.
Yeah.
You've got to survive that. If you can survive that, then you're going to be good. The schedule sets up much better later in the year.
Right. Because they have 8 games before a bye, and then they have 2 buys within 4 games.
Right.
Like that's
right.
It's just weird the way the schedule sets up.
That's why the depth is so important.
Yes, absolutely.
That's because you can take a whole game off of snaps if you have good depth.
Sure. Oh yeah.
That's the reality of it. If not, game and a half, 2 games. Yeah. So we're gonna see. Now we got 2 more young bucks we're gonna talk about too, Vince.
We do. Incoming freshmen. You've got early enrollee Christian Gray, and then you've got regular enrollees on campus now, Micah Bell. And so 2 freshmen. There was a question in the chat at one point, obviously long gone by now, but somebody was asking, do you think that Christian Gray can start at some point this season or get considerable minutes moving forward? And I will toss that to you to get this thing kicked off to talk about these incoming freshmen.
I mean, when you look at Christian Gray, it would be foolish of me to start talking about him being a starter because he's not going to beat out Cam Hart or Benjamin Morrison, right?
Agreed.
So when you look at Christian Gray, I'd feel a lot better about saying yes, for sure, he can start if need be, had he not gotten hurt halfway through spring ball.
Right.
That's the reality of it. And he was just starting to kind of find his groove as that happened. The thing about him is he's a natural in a lot of ways, Vince. I mean, his junior year, I liked him, but, I thought he was a good technician and he was long, but there's just something about him that just really I wasn't sure about. I had a hard time really buying in to him being a big-time top 100 guy. And then he comes out his senior year and he locks down Aaron Scott, locks down he gives up like 1 reception to Cardinal Tate. That's it. Locks down Ryan Wingo, and you're just like, all right, cool. And then I remember one of my favorite clips of the season is Jeremiah Love is playing against DeSmet, which is where Christian Gray went. And so Christian Brothers, Jeremiah is running, and he's got an easy touchdown. and he's getting kind of close to the touchdown. He looks back, and Christian Gray is like, shh, like, and so then like Jeremiah has to speed up a little bit to get to the end zone because it's like, this dude is coming. And so you think about the competition he had to play against, and then you look at him and say, boy, this is a guy that has the tools to be an outstanding player.
Sure.
But he's skinny. He's 180 pounds, 175, 180 pounds. He ended up missing half of the spring. And you have to ask yourself, is this a guy that's going to be able to go out there and be ready early on? Well, then you say, well, you don't really need him to be ready day one. You just need him to be ready at some point in time in the season. And so I don't know where Christian's going to be this year. I think he's going to have he's going to have to battle to beat out Jaden Mickey and Ryan Barnes and Chance Tucker, but he's got the tools to do it. And in other years, Vince, you're talking about him being a guy that we're counting on to come in and play. I mean, 2 years ago, you're asking him to start.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. In 2020, he's starting over Clarence Lewis. You know, I mean, that's just if he's a freshman at the same time.
Because they would have both been freshmen. You're right.
Correct. He would have been that guy.
He's ahead of where Clarence Lewis was as a freshman.
Because he's a way better, more talented player than Clarence was at the same time. So you're looking at a guy that has all the tools. It's just he's kind of walking into a situation when Notre Dame's cornerback room is as healthy as it's been since 2018, when they had arguably the best 1-2 cornerback punch in the country, along with, you know, like Clemson, I think was the other team that I thought was in that conversation, and they both played pretty dang well in the game against each other. So that's kind of where we're at. Vince is you know, they don't need him to play right away, but he's a bit of a wild card, because if Clarence Lewis is playing this year, it's not because they need him to. It's because he's just too good.
Right.
Like, dude, we can't sit this guy. This guy's phenomenal. Like, we can't afford to not play him. He's as good as we have. He's just young. Right. And then you look at Micah Bell, and the minute Micah Bell steps foot on campus, Chris Tyree is no longer the fastest player on the football team.
Which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Mind-blowing to me.
Now, he's raw. He needs a lot of work. But you're talking about a guy that you just went and added a lot of speed to your roster with these two freshmen. Because like Clarence Lewis was timed at 4.41 and a 4.42 at Ohio State's camp as a junior. And then he went out, and I'm like, I don't know if he's – I remember – I think I said in the show, Mo, I don't know that – I don't see that kind of speed on the field because he's just so smooth and fluid and just kind of looks effortless at times. Well, then this year when he was playing against dudes every week and he had to kind of – you know, they could test him with speed, and you're like, okay, yeah, he's that fast, because he's just – he's like toying with Ryan Wingo right now, just toying with him. And he's just toying with Jeremiah McClellan right now. You're just like, okay, this guy can freaking run. And he's not even close to your fastest cornerback in the freshman class with him and Micah Bell. So that's a big improvement. Now, Micah Bell's one, I don't know how ready he's going to be technically to play as a freshman. I could see him being a guy that they kind of say, hey, early on, let's work at him as a nickel. Okay. And say, hey, we've got that really fast cover guy, that next Tariq Bracy type of nickel. Because the other nickels on the roster, we'll get into the nickels here in a second, they're different than what Tariq was. Sure. This is kind of that guy that brings a little bit of that, plus much more speed than what Tariq brought to the table. So I'm very curious to see what the two freshmen can do. When you look at Christian Gray, Vince, all the tools are there. When you look at Micah Bell, you say, boy, this guy can flat out fly. And it was a 1,000-yard running back the last 2 years. I mean, so he's a tough kid too. It's just how quickly, like, if you could turn them into one kid, it's a freshman All-American. I mean, because, you know, Christian would have that just dynamic speed. You know, he'd have a little bit more strength, you know, just lower body strength. Because in some ways, Micah Bell kind of has a little bit of running back in him, you know. And then if Micah Bell could have Christian's length and technique, he's playing as a freshman. Right. And so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of influence they're going to be able to make. But here's the other thing too, Vince. We talked about the veterans like Chance Tucker, Ryan Barnes, Jaden Mickey. Here's the other part of it that I love. You better play well, not only because do we need you, but if you don't, I got two freshmen that have more God-given ability than you do. If you're not going to make plays, if you're not going to bring it, if you're not going to be focused, if you're not going to do what we're asking you to do, I'm just going to put the more talented freshman in there and see what he can do. And that's where depth is so important. So important.
That's where recruiting comes in, right? Yeah. I mean, you're always recruiting to make your team better. And I love the fact that they're bringing in new guys. They're bringing in freshmen from the recruiting ranks, and not even transfers. I'm just talking about legit recruits from high school. You're bringing these guys in to push the guys that are ahead of them. And ask them when they come in. Stand at their dorm room and ask them when they come in on campus for the first time, hey, do you think you can play at Notre Dame? Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Like,
Right.
these guys know they can play. They want to play. They're going to give it everything they've got because they're going to try to get on the field.
Right.
And it's only going to make the guys above them either better, or they're going to be like, okay, get out of my way. Here I come.
Right.
And look, Coach Mickens, you could say a lot of things about Coach Mickens, positive, obviously. He's not afraid to play freshmen. He will play the best kid to make the team better. That's what he's going to do. And he's proven it many, many times. And he'll do it again if he needs to. You know, he's going to give all these other guys the absolute shot that they deserve, but he is going to allow freshmen, if need be, to bypass those guys on the depth chart. So we saw it with Jaden Mickey in the spring. We obviously saw it with Morrison in the fall and the summer, obviously. And so if Christian Gray does what he needs to do and those guys aren't, he's going to play. And I know you wouldn't be upset to see him play.
Well, I would and I wouldn't. I get what you're saying. Like, I think he's very talented, and I think he could end up being an impact player. We've talked before when we were talking about it from a recruiting standpoint of, him kind of forcing his way into the field this year, and then being a backup this season. Then he could end up being the guy to replace Cam Hart in the field next year, and then he moves into the boundary the year after when Benjamin Morrison goes pro, right? If that were to be the case, that's certainly a track and a path that he could be on. Now, Jaden Mickey's not going to give up that starting role in 2024 easily, right?
Yes.
But certainly he brings the talent. And if he's not playing, if he's not starting, and there's not another injury in the conversation, then that means Jaden Mickey and Chance Tucker or one of those guys has really stepped up and is playing very well. So it's not that I want to see him play as if like I like him more than others. It's just that it's nice to know that if other guys don't get the job done, then you're in great shape. That to me is more of the key for me. And that's why I love depth, because we've talked for a lot of years, Vince, with Notre Dame. And, hey, look, if this guy stays healthy, this team's going to be really, really good. And there's always it's like almost every position. If they don't have any injuries this year and everybody plays their potential and nobody takes a step back, this Notre Dame football team's going to be really good. Well, here's the reality of it. That always happens. Somebody's not going to be as good. Look, I don't know who it's going to be. Someone that we think is going to be a good player this year is not going to take the jump that we think he's going to take.
Sure.
Someone's not going to be as good as they were last year. Someone's going to get hurt. That's just going to happen at some position. We don't know what it's going to be. But when you have a deeper team and you have the kind of athletes that Notre Dame needs to have, then you have situations where you can survive those things. And that's kind of where I come from on that whole thing.
Absolutely agree. Okay, so people are asking what
we'll get to him last.
Oh.
We'll get to him last. I'm going to go to the nickel first. I'm going to go to Thomas Harper first. Yeah.
I
thought people keep asking about Clarence.
Right. And I was going to say we're going to talk about
all
nickel
by himself.
Yeah,
he's going to be his own special category.
He's got his own special category. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk about the nickel now. Obviously, Notre Dame hit the transfer portal, brought in Thomas Harper. Disappointing that Thomas Harper was injured all during spring. At least it was for me. I really wanted to see him out there, see what he could do in the nickel, see what he could do running around with these guys. I was very disappointed to see that. But they brought him in for a very specific reason, and that reason was to play nickel. He's listed as a safety on the depth chart. We wanted to talk about him at corner because nickel is a corner, is a safety, whatever. We want to talk about
the way that Notre Dame uses their nickel. It's more like a corner.
Right.
And we were going to talk about him at safety until Antonio Carter signed. Once Antonio Carter signed, you have your depth now at safety.
Right.
And now you can look at Thomas Harper as more of a pure corner because, Vince, when you look at it last year, and look, if you one of the cool things that Pro Football Focus actually does is they break down where you lined up. And he played 61 snaps last year as a free safety. He played 12 snaps last year at cornerback. And then he played about 300 and I'm trying to do the math here real quick, 323 snaps as either a slot or in the box, which is basically the box means he was a slot, but they brought him in and brought him off the edge or had him inside. So 323 snaps, and like that's what he does. 61 snaps as a safety, 12. So he had 330 some snaps as a corner slot second level defender. He only had 61 snaps as a third level defender, right?
Right.
It's not a safety.
Right.
He's a nickel. And so that was why it was so important for them to get a guy like Antonio Carter, because Antonio Carter can do all that stuff too. Because Antonio Carter was a cornerback at Rhode Island. And if push comes to shove and you really had a need there, you could move Antonio Carter to corner. He played against Pitt and held his own against Pitt last year as a corner. But you're going to be able to move him to safety, which allows you to have Thomas Harper as a pure corner. And the way that they'll use him is more as part of what you're doing with the corners than it is the safeties. And that's why we're talking about Thomas Harper in this conversation. And it comes down to it is if you can get the guy that they had for 7 games last year at Oklahoma State. You've got a guy that has a chance to be a really, really good football player. A really good football player. And, gave up fewer yards per catch than Tariq Bracy did last year in a league that's still pretty offense dominated. And I've said this to people before. You want to know how good Thomas Harper is? Go watch the TCU game. Watch how TCU tried to go at him early, had 0 success. They had a 24-7 lead, 24-14 lead. He gets hurt. And literally the next, I believe it's literally the next series, TCU goes down and scores and starts their comeback and beats Oklahoma State. That's how important he is. And if you look at TCU or Oklahoma State's defense in the second half of the year, he only played one more game after that. He came back against Kansas State, got hurt again, and he was out for the year. And it coincides with their defense faltering. Is he the only reason for it? No. Is he definitely an important reason why? Yes. So question number one with Thomas Harper is, can he stay healthy?
Absolutely.
That's going to be question number one.
He hasn't practiced one time with Notre Dame
yet.
Well,
he did. He didn't go any to contact, but he did like some one-on-ones. He did
a little bit. Okay.
He was running around. He just wasn't in anything contact related.
Gotcha.
But that's also not so it means you're not like in a team setting unless it's like walkthrough stuff, right?
Working with the guys that you're going to be playing with.
We didn't see him tackle anybody. We didn't see him beat blocks. We didn't see him doing that stuff. But he wasn't just on the sideline like Jadarian Price or anything like that. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. But if he can step up as the nickel, you don't miss a beat. As long as he can pick up the defense and be the guy he was at Oklahoma State, you don't miss a beat at cornerback at the slot. And that's huge because Tariq Bracy was a very important part of this defense last year. Just go ask Ohio State how important Tariq Bracy is. Go ask USC how easy it was to game plan to play Notre Dame when they didn't have Tariq Bracy playing in the slot. Right? He was a very important and integral piece to this defense last year.
If they had like an award for the most underrated player at Notre Dame, he would, for me, be at the top of the list. Like, he did not get the respect that he deserved for what he was able to do, period. And to be honest with you, even at the next level, from a drafting standpoint, didn't get the respect that he deserved and how he can play the game. But that's another conversation. But
you're adding a guy to me that's bigger, that can come close to matching you for speed, is stronger, and even more productive than Tariq was last year. So that's what he brings to the table. Yeah, it is. And so he's a guy that you look at and say, man, if this kid can be for Notre Dame what he was at Oklahoma State, then Notre Dame doesn't miss a beat. And if they cannot miss a beat at corner, and then the other two guys can be more consistent, all of a sudden your situation in the secondary is really, really impressive. And now what's wild is, I don't know if like anybody watched this film last year, because I'm watching these lists of like 60, 70, transfers are going to be big, and like no mention of transfers.
Never, yeah.
And I'm just like, did you guys not watch this kid play last year or the year before? I'm kind of struggling to figure out what the heck you guys are looking at, because I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out, because he was pretty good the year before, Vince. Like he gave up, he allowed 66.7% completion percent in 2021, but only gave up 70 yards. 5.8. So that just means all the receptions he gives up are like just little stuff in front of him that he just rallied and tackled the ball. He wasn't giving up anything deep.
Right.
And those are things you look at and say, boy, this guy's got a chance to be a really good football player. A really good football player. If they can keep him healthy and have him mentally adapt and technically adapt to what they're doing defensively. That's not always a guarantee, right? So that's why there's a little bit of an asterisk here.
Sure.
But if he does those two things, this is where your coverage is going to be outstanding this season on the second level. That, we'll talk about the third level here in a couple weeks. All right, the safety position.
That's a different conversation.
But your second level is strong. And so I think it was very important to, when we talk about why we think this corner position is loaded, part of it is it's the depth behind it. It's the freshmen, obviously the starters, but it's also Thomas Harper is a reason for me why I view it to be so good. Because I know he's listed as a safety, but for all intents and purposes,
we knew the second they brought him in that he was going to be a nickel.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, he's more of a corner than he is a safety.
Sure.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, good point. So let's get to the guy that everybody not everybody, people in the chat are curious about where he's at. Why did we not bring him up?
They
Clarence
thought we
Lewis.
forgot him.
How could we forget Clarence? Come on,
Yeah.
man. We can't forget Clarence. So Clarence Lewis has obviously been around for a while. He is a senior. He started as a freshman at corner. He legitimately got passed up last year at corner by Benjamin Morrison. What are they going to do with Clarence Lewis, Brian? We're talking about him in the nickel category. Is that where you see him as the most productive or possibility to get on the field?
Well, I think that's where we saw him at his best last year.
Sure.
I mean, if you want to look at it, that's where Clarence Lewis was at his best last year. When you look at him in the spring, that's where he was at his best. When Clarence gets in trouble is when you can isolate him on the outside in a one-on-one. We saw it in 2021. We saw it in 2022. When you can isolate him in a one-on-one outside, he just doesn't have the speed to run vertically with speedy guys.
Right.
And the best teams on your schedule are going to do that against him. And so he didn't get exposed against Ohio State because Ohio State just refuses to throw the ball down the field with any consistency whatsoever. North Carolina is the exact opposite. They like to throw the ball down the field. And so what do? They beat him for like a 60, 70-yard touchdown because they just run right by him. And so he's just not a guy that you look at and say, boy, that's just a guy that really needs to be playing outside cornerback a lot. Now, the problem is he may need to, because if those other guys don't step up, you're going to have to play Clarence there. And that's why it's important that those guys step up, because the one really good thing about Clarence Lewis is he's a bit of a I can do anything kind of guy. I'm a jack of all trades. I can play corner. I can play slot. I can play safety. I think he can play safety. But where he's best at is he's best in the nickel. Yeah. And he's best as a guy that can be part of a rotation. So if Jaden Mickey doesn't step up, then you're going to see Clarence playing nickel and field. If Chance Tucker doesn't step up or Ryan Barnes doesn't step up, then you're going to see Clarence playing nickel and boundary. And I think ideally that's not going to be as the best case for him. I think the best thing for Clarence is him and Thomas Harper are both manning that nickel spot. And maybe playing like a 60-40 split in most weeks, because I think Clarence is pretty solid there, and this takes some of the wear and tear off of Thomas Harper, at least early in the year. And so to me, that's where I see Clarence. But he's a bit of a unicorn in this secondary, in that Vince is he's literally one of the maybe two guys, maybe the only guy that could play all five secondary positions, in my opinion.
Because we were pushing for him to be moved to safety for
100%,
a while,
100%, and we'd still be doing that if they didn't get Antonio Carter. Right? That's exactly what we'd be saying. Like, they need to make this move right now. If they didn't,
they needed to make the move a year ago, but that's a different conversation.
It's a different. But that's what's so interesting about the nickel position is because the things that expose him outside you're not exposed the same way as he can use his technique more. He can use his intelligence more. He can use his instincts more and be protected over the top. And I think that's a key for him to be an effective corner, an effective slot guy. But I know the staff is high on him, Vince, but the reality is you're not going to be able to use him outside, in my opinion, against the Ohio States, but even more so against the USCs, the Clemsons, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the teams that you're going to be playing. If you're truly competing for a championship, you have to have Clarence inside and as a rotation player, not as a starter. And where he's ultimately going to play, and this is partly why he's at the end too, is where he's going to play is ultimately not going to be determined by him. It's going to be determined by all the other dudes that we talked about.
Sure.
And how well they perform and whether or not they're able to say, hey, look, you can put Clarence in one position now because I got this, he's got this, he's got that. And honestly, I think that'd be great for Clarence.
Yeah.
Because he's played boundary, field, nickel. You've moved them all over the place. Let him learn to spot and be good with it. And then when Thomas Harper's gone, now maybe all of a sudden Clarence is able to, well, I've really mastered this nickel stuff down, and now I've got the nickel position.
Sure.
Or if Thomas Harper has another injury, you're going to slide Clarence in there. And the reason this is not a demotion in my view, Vince, because when you look at Notre Dame's schedule this year and you look at Robert and I as the new coordinator in NC State, they're going to throw the football a lot.
Sure.
Just go watch Virginia in 2020. Even Syracuse threw the ball a lot last year. You look at Ohio State's going to throw the ball a ton. You look at Duke as a spread team that's going to have a mobile quarterback, and they're going to throw the ball a lot. Louisville now has Jeff Brom. They're going to throw the ball a ton. USC is going to throw the ball a lot. Now, they're going to still run it, but they're spread throwing at teams. Wake Forest is going to spread it out and throw it. Stanford's going to spread it out and throw it. Almost every team you play that has a pulse, with the exception of Pitt, is a team that you're going to need to have your nickel defense be almost your base defense.
Absolutely. Well, how many times did they start in the nickel last year? A bunch. Like Tariq Bracy got a bunch of starts last year. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but I know he was on the field first numerous times, and nickel became their base last year. It did. And I would say a lot of the things that you just said about Clarence Lewis, about him being able to use his technique and all of these different things, is what made Tariq Bracy really good in that spot at the nickel position. I think it just fit his skill set, and I think this fits Clarence Lewis's skill set better than maybe playing on the outside. But I mean, he could do it if he had to.
He looks so more. I mean, Vince, doesn't he just look so much more natural in the slot to me?
100%.
I mean, he just looks smooth. He looks natural. He looks like he runs better there. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that is, but he just looks more comfortable there. But you've had to move him all over. And I think it's been to his – now, it's partly been because of how – I mean, he's just that guy. Clarence is just one of those guys like, hey, coach, where you need me this week? All right, cool. Sure. I bet. I'm going to go learn it and do the best I can. And then that's a great asset to have. But I think sometimes you could do that to his detriment.
Yeah.
Because now you need – where is he the best football player? Because you can't tell me that Clarence Lewis is great at all his positions. Otherwise, he'd be starting and playing a lot more and not be getting beat the way that he does. But I love the fact that when whenever Clarence has been called upon, he's answered the bell. And he's a guy that played a lot better last year than some fans give him credit for because of how bad he was in 2021. That then the couple times he does get beat in 2022, it's like, Clarence still sucks. No, they put him in a situation where he should never have been guarding the goal route. And I think I still say that long play against North Carolina, I still say there's a blown coverage. He might have been the one that blew it. But he played that go route like he thought he was getting cover two help over the top. He just did.
I completely agree. He just wasn't there.
Now, he may have been the one that blew it. He may have gotten the wrong coverage.
But he played it as if it was cover two.
Correct. So it's not like the dude just straight ran by him. Mm-hmm. But that's the risk that you run is you don't have a guy that has the recovery speed to overcome that.
Sure.
And, hey, I still got beat, but the guy caught it and I tackled him. Right. Not he caught it and then ran away from me for a touchdown. So I think you're almost to his detriment. He's almost too much of a jack of all trades to his own detriment.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like if those other players step up and Clarence, because of the COVID year, has another year left, if you can have Clarence kind of be that rotation nickel, be a special teams guy, if Thomas Harper goes down again, then you're still okay there with Clarence. But it's going to be harder for him to master that if you're just moving him around all over the place.
Sure. Yeah.
And so he brings great value in that he is so versatile. But I think if you're really going to view Clarence Lewis as a guy that's going to play a lot of snaps for you, eventually you have to say, this is where he's going to be the best.
Right.
And I have never seen Clarence Lewis play better at cornerback as I thought he did at slot last year. And that's ultimately the reason why I think that's the position where he should end up. Mm-hmm. But the reason you got to talk about him last is because he is going to be so much where he plays is going to be so much impacted by what Chance Tucker does, by what Jaden Mickey does, by who gets hurt at those positions. How does Ryan Barnes perform? Is Christian Gray ready to help you out? Can Micah Bell do certain things? That's going to all determine just how much. And let's say Micah Bell, like this guy's got to play. Well, where does he? He's really only comfortable right now at nickel. Okay, then now we'll move Clarence out here, and Micah Bell can be that guy. So no matter how you look at it, Vince, I think that's the least likely scenario right now. The reason that you talk about Clarence last is because I believe where he ultimately ends up is going to be determined by how other guys perform. And if they play the way we hope, and then Clarence can stay in the nickel, I think that's going to be better for Clarence. And it also means that this cornerback depth chart is going to be really, really good.
Yeah, it's a domino effect, right? I mean, it's a domino effect. If he's allowed to just focus on nickel, that means everybody else is doing what we hope they are doing, and the depth chart is solid everywhere else. And that means that if it's solid everywhere else, everything is going right. and the secondary could be really, really good. And obviously, we're only talking about the corners and the nickel today, but corner and nickel can be really, really good. And that can mask some other things that if you have issues. But
that's right.
We're going to talk about those other potential issues at a later date.
That's right.
So we at the end of our depth chart breakdown, we like to kind of throw out some different things. So like, what are we most confident in? Biggest question marks, and then a couple of bold predictions, Brian.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the cornerback position, what are you most confident? I've got two written down here.
Well, Vince, give yours, because mine are I'm pretty much where you are with the first one for sure.
Okay. So my first one is, and let me be real clear here. And I think I hate that I have to say this every time, but obviously this is if everybody's healthy.
Sure. ...
Right. So my first one is Hart and Morrison are going to be in the conversation for the best cornerback duo in the country when it's all said and done.
Right now, they're in the conversation of one of the top 6 or 7.
Right.
We're talking about
like one or two, like best.
They're battling with Bama, with teams like that we have the best cornerback tandem.
Exactly.
Agree.
That's what I'm most confident. I really think
it's also a bit of a bold prediction too.
It is. It is. But yeah, I mean, it is. There's no doubt about it. It is a bold prediction. I went a little more specific, like with stats and things like that. But it is a little bit of a bold prediction because when was the last time Notre Dame was able to say that? It's been a long
2018
time. Okay.
I mean, last time they were able to say that, they went 12-0.
Yeah.
And had one of the best defenses in college football.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I'm talking about the 2018 Julian Love and Troy Pride. But what did they lack that year? What was the one missing ingredient to that defense that year? They didn't have nickel.
Sure.
They tried to use Houston Griffith there early, and he wasn't cut out for that. Then they tried to put Asmar out there as a rover. He wasn't. They had a hard time with the nickel position in 2018. And that's the one big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So my second most confident thing is that the play of the corners will allow the front 7 to play at a higher level.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of common sense if you know football and you know X's and O's and things like that.
That's why it's a confidence level, not a bold prediction.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why I'm confident in that. I think that is going to allow some of these younger backers, some of the depth of the defensive line. They're all going to be able to play at a higher level, a little bit more loose, a little bit more go get the football kind of a deal, which I think is where this front 7 is going to be at their best, is if they're just allowed to play and not have to worry about when the ball goes over their head. They're not going to have to worry about that, I don't think. And they're just going to be allowed to play. So it's going to take the front 7's game to another level.
Well, I think it allows Al Golden to be more aggressive with them too.
Exactly.
I think that's the other part is he wants to blitz. Like they spent all freaking spring blitzing, just all spring. Well, why? I mean, well, that's what Al Golden likes to do. But why? You're an idiot as a coach if you're a heavy blitz team and you don't have big time corners.
Right.
You're an idiot. You can't. Right. You have to be real strategic with your blitzing. So I don't think Al Golden's an idiot. I think Al Golden understands, hey, we got something pretty good here from a coverage standpoint on the second level between our 2 outside corners, our nickel, the kid that we're bringing in, and then even to a degree Clarence Lewis as that guy. So, hey, we can be more aggressive. We can turn these linebackers. We have undersized linebackers that can run. Okay, well, how do we take advantage of that?
Yeah,
let's turn them loose
a
little bit. You know, we don't have the biggest edge guys, so let's turn them loose. And you can do that when you have corners that can come up and play press. Because what can happen if you're a heavy blitz team and you have to back off is you get into situations where teams are just going to pick you apart. They're going to bubble you out, quick outs, hitches, slides, things like that, right? They're just going to nickel and dime you to death. Well, what Notre Dame is able to do is say, hey, we're going to take your quick game away by our leverage and by our cover one. We're going to play press coverage. So if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat it down the field. But if we're bringing more than you have to block, or we're bringing this overload, or we're able to get some kind of pressure on you, you're not going to have time to get the ball down the field.
Right.
And so that's something that you need to have strength at cornerback in order to do that.
Right.
You'll see defenses, Vince, are like, man, I'd like to blitz more, but I just can't because I'm not corners.
Do it.
Or you have coaches that like to blitz, say, well, this is who we are, we're going to blitz, but then you're not going to corner. Brent Venables last year at Clemson was that way. I mean, you talk about one of the reasons why. I mean, that defense underachieved big time in 2021. We talked a lot about that, and the reason it underachieved that year. Now the numbers were good at the end of the year, but they did not play well in big games. They dominated some really bad teams. And why did they get in trouble late in the year? They got in trouble late in the year because when they played teams could throw the football. And the reason is because no matter how good their front seven was, they couldn't stop teams from throwing the football. I mean, yeah, they dominated Syracuse, who sucks. They dominated Georgia Tech, who sucked, and South Carolina State, who sucked, and all that. But then look what happens when they got to go play Boston College, who has a quarterback that can actually throw the ball down the field. It throws for 311 yards. Look what happens when they play Kenny Pickett and Pitt. They lose by 10 points, and Kenny Pickett throws for 302 yards. Then they beat up on Florida State, who wasn't that good that year. They beat up on Louisville, who sucked. They beat up on Connecticut, who sucked. Then Sam Hartman throws for 370 yards on them, right? And so they were lucky that they didn't play the schedule in 2022 2021 that they played in 2022, because then they'd have been in even more trouble because they played more teams. But they got in trouble in those games because they didn't have the secondary that could cover and protect the blitz. And so when you look at it, Vince, and now of course their scheme is a little bit different this year, but you've got to be able to have guys can cover,
right? If
you're going to be aggressive.
Yep.
And they do. Now, you can also, even if you have great corners, you can still blitz too much. And that's, we're going to see about that. But to your point is, you don't have to protect your front seven. You don't have to protect your corners with your front seven.
Right, exactly.
You can protect your front seven with your corners.
Exactly.
And that's something even the 2018 cornerbacks couldn't do, because Troy Pride could play man coverage, but Julian Love could not. Julian Love was a zone
He's
corner.
a zone guy all the way. Yeah.
I remember they tried to play him in man early, and Nico Collins just torched him for a 50-yard play for Michigan. You remember that, Vince? He just beat him on a post route. They're like, yeah, no more of that. We're good.
Good. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses.
Go back to zone. Yeah. So
that's what it is, man.
Yes, I agree with that. I think probably the other thing I'm most confident in is that they're going to have the depth this year to be able to sustain poor play or injury, but more so that they're going to have the depth this year to be able to take some of the burden off of Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison, at least in 7 or 8 of the games that they play this year. I don't know that I'm ready to say that. I trust Gray and Mickey and Tucker and Barnes against Ohio State, USC. Sure. At this point in time, they've still got to prove that to me. But I do think from what we've seen enough so far that those guys are going to be ready to play against NC State and Tennessee State and Louisville and Pitt and those type of teams. So that's something that I'm confident in this year, Vince.
Sure. Biggest question marks. And it's funny that you just mentioned the confidence in the depth chart. That's my biggest question mark, is the depth chart. And it's not about my lack of confidence, I guess, in the depth chart, but it's still a question mark for me. I think a lot hinges on the guys behind Hart and Morrison. Can they be able to spell those guys? Can, God forbid there's an injury for a game or two, can they step up and be okay against a Duke or a Pitt or something along those lines? Can they sustain a lot longer than that? Can they just relieve for a couple of series? Like all the things that we talked about in the previous 90 minutes, that's a big question mark for me, because we haven't seen those guys in those roles before. Not saying they can't do it, but it's still a question mark for me as to will they do it?
Sure. They got to prove it. They got to prove it. And that's why I say, Vince, part of my confidence level was at least in 8 of the games. Right? We don't know I think the question that you have is, I hope that you don't have doubt that they can cover guys at Tennessee State and Central Michigan and
Right.
Pitt and
Sure.
you know,
They shouldn't be scholarship players at Notre Dame if they couldn't do that.
But those aren't the games you're paid to, win as a head coach at Notre Dame. You're paid to beat Clemson. You're paid to beat Ohio State. You're paid to beat USC. You're paid to get to the college football playoff and compete for championship. We don't know. So yes, the thing I'm confident in those games is also still a question mark for the other thing. So yes, that is, can those teams play well enough in the big moments? I still think it's a question that the current corners can play like that in big games. I just think overall, we saw them play great against Ohio State, the corners, that is. We saw them play great against Clemson. We saw them play up and down against North Carolina. We saw them play up and down I'm trying to remember, who was the other game that the corners give me a second, Vince. I'm going to try to remember. Syracuse. Benjamin Morrison had a bit of a rough game against Syracuse. Clarence played really well. We saw Stanford. I didn't think the corners played well against Stanford. We don't know how they're going to play against USC because Benjamin Morrison played great, but because they just didn't throw at him. There's no Cam Hart, no Clarence, no Tariq Bracy in that game. So to me, I think the whole cornerback rotation, you have to look and say, okay, was the Ohio State game an anomaly?
Right.
Or is that just who they are? But I would say they were tested last year in several games. I mean, go watch the BC game. I mean, Zay Flowers became a favorite of draft analysts. And you know what I didn't see in all the highlights that he played in? I never saw any Notre Dame highlights because, sometimes you say, well, look, Emmett Morehead didn't have time to throw him the ball. That was true, but he wasn't open either. I mean, he was getting blanketed until Clarence Lewis or Cam Hart obviously got hurt. But I mean, they tried to throw screens to him, and Notre Dame ate him up. I mean, so they were really hitting their peak as a cornerback tandem, and then Cam goes down, and we don't get a seat because I was looking forward to that matchup against USC big time with Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison outside, and then we just didn't get a chance to see it. And so that's a question mark for me. I think the other one for me too, Vince, is the question mark for me is, can Thomas Harper stay healthy and adapt to the defense? We talked about that earlier. Like, it's a question. Anytime there's a new guy,
sure,
you can automatically assume he's going to just do exactly what he did at another team that plays in a different defense. And, especially when it's a guy coming off of an injury. So Thomas Harper to me is still a question mark. But man, I'll tell you what though, Vince, if he answers that question mark, he's going to be really good because the tools are there. There's no question about the talent. The question is more about the health, adapting to the defense and things like that. That'd probably be my other question mark. Okay, for the cornerback tandem. I understand where you're coming from.
Sure,
and I'm just saying I think that's a bit of a question mark in the big games for all of them.
Gotcha.
At this point in time.
Well, and mine, I guess, is similar to your Thomas Harper one, and it pains me to even say this because I am a huge Cam Hart fan, but I did put on here, and we talked about it when we were talking about Cam Hart specifically, right? Can he step up when picked on, right? Because I do think there's going to be more balls coming his way because of all the fanfare that Benjamin Morrison is getting. Can he be consistent? I know he's got the talent to do it, but can he be consistent enough when that ball is coming his way? I think he can, but it's a question.
Can I zero in on something you're saying here, Vince, to maybe it's your concern, right, but let me state it differently and see if this is what you're getting at. My biggest question was Cam Hart outside of staying healthy. He is a great player in coverage. He does not play the football very well.
Yeah.
That's the issue. And so to me, like, you look at the Wisconsin game 2 years ago, that's a bit of an anomaly for Cam's career. You look at the Ohio State game. Well, he gave up a 50-yard touchdown. They didn't beat him deep. He misplayed an out cut and tried to go under it when he should have just played over top and let the guy catch it and then make the tackle, right? He doesn't get the number of his hand on the football and find the football like the way that Benjamin Morrison does. Like, Benjamin Morrison's ability to find the football and play it is exceptional. Cam doesn't do that.
Sure.
And that's something that I want to see him do a better job of. So I think that it's not the coverage part that has ever the question mark. It's the handsy thing. But dude, you got to find the football better, make more plays on the football when you turn around, when it's in front of him. And that's what happened against Wisconsin. When it's in front of him, he plays it very well.
Right.
Once he flips his hip, he doesn't do and that somewhat understandable because he's a kid that hasn't played a ton of cornerback.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's for me for Cam. It's that. Can he make more plays on
makes
football?
Sense. Absolutely. Because
His
then there's going to be
talent
more footballs
otherwise
coming his
dictate?
way. I mean,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
going to be key.
Like
And
it's not.
yeah.
Do I worry about Cam Hart getting beat?
Right.
It's like the North Carolina game. Cam Hart was in perfect position. He couldn't find the football. Remember that first play of the game where he just threw it over his head? He was in perfect position. He had great coverage. He got his hand up, but he couldn't find the football. He couldn't play the football, I should say.
Right.
Those are the things like, boy, if he can fix that, man, he's going to be holy moly. Because, like, look, if he can fix that, Vince, and stay healthy, he could be their best corner this year.
Sure.
And that's saying a lot when you consider how good Benjamin Morrison was last year and how good we expect him to be. And nobody has been on the Benjamin Morrison hype train longer than I have.
Sure.
Nobody. Except
right.
maybe Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman.
Oh, no.
Maybe. No, not his parents. No, I'm just kidding about that one. Parents are always the caveats.
Absolutely.
But,
yeah, right.
Of the non-familial people – right? I don't know if I can beat grandma and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
Of the non-family, I think nobody's been on this hype train longer than me.
Sure.
And that's how good Cam Hart can be, though.
I agree.
It's just Cam has a lot more questions because Benjamin is like the epitome of just soundness.
Yes.
Right?
Of questions answered. I mean,
yes,
he needs to take another step, which would make sense going from 18 to 19 years old.
But literally, Vince, if the only improvements Benjamin Morrison makes the next 2 years are strength, he's going to be an All-American.
Yeah.
Our thing with him is just don't take a step back.
Correct.
Right? Don't regress.
Right. And I don't think that's going to happen. That's why it's not a question for me.
But with Cam, it's dude, I need to see that guy for 50 plays a game, not 10.
Sure.
And I need to see that guy like never again. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing with Cam is there's like Benjamin was just kind of here early in the season, and then he dipped a little bit, Stanford and Syracuse, and then he was up here, and then he just like whoosh, like that, right? Like there's just a steadiness to his excellence. But like Cam was like, okay, that's the best cornerback play we've seen all year, and then like, what the flipping heck are you doing? And then and those are the things Cam has to clean up. And if he can, like I know Benjamin's getting all the hype, and it's deserved. But I'm telling you, if Cam plays to his potential, and people actually watch the film and don't just rely on, their opinions and presumptions and looking at stats, there could be a case that Cam Hart's their best cornerback next season. And he's got that potential. And if he's their best cornerback, we're talking about him being on the best cornerback on the team with a dude that I have not seen anyone have lower than a preseason third-team All-American list. And most people have him second or first.
Right.
That's saying something. And that's where my optimism comes at this position.
All right, it's kind of fun time. It's bold prediction time, and this is meant to be kind of a fun little topic. We're gonna go out on a limb, have some fun with it. I feel like my first one is out on a limb. I feel like my second one is just a good prediction, but I put it under bold prediction anyway because why the heck not? So my first bold prediction, Brian, I went and looked at PBUs, pass breakups, right? Are you aware? I'm sure you are because you know all this stuff. Are you aware that Notre Dame was 129th out of 131 teams in pass breakups last year?
I didn't know that they were that low, but I knew that they were low.
They were really low. Yeah. They only had 24 all season. And just for experiment's sake, the number one team was Penn State with 85. So 24-85. So that's
pass breakups, right?
Pass breakups. Yep, PBUs.
And it shouldn't come as a surprise that a team like that also ranked pretty low in turnovers, red zone defense, right? I mean,
right, yeah. Absolutely. So
it all goes together.
My bold prediction, and I don't even know how bold this is, but my bold prediction is that they're going to more than double their pass breakups this year. They're going to have north of 50. They're going to have 50 pass breakups this year.
And that's the secondary or the corners?
It's the secondary. It's the entire, obviously, it's the entire defense, I guess, really. But I just feel like Notre Dame is going to have a better opportunity to get their hands on the ball. I think their corners are going to be better at that. They're going to be more active when the ball is in the air. And to me, it's kind of headlined by the corners, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's my big, bold prediction.
All right, what's your number two?
My number two is that Jaden Mickey will absolutely thrive in the third cornerback role, and he will be ready to step in as the starter when Hart takes off for the NFL after this year.
Okay. I can dig that. I'm gonna have some fun. I struggle with bold predictions because
I know, me too.
Part of it's because I just know the reaction. Like, there's gonna be some knucklehead that's like, "Well, you said this," and I'm like, "Dude, we were having some fun." But whatever.
Right.
Here's my bold prediction for the year, and I'm gonna go back and look and see when the last time this happened. So just give me 1 second, Vince. I'm gonna try to find the last time this happened. All right, so that's 8. All right, I don't think I'm gonna be able to find it. Here's my prediction: the Notre Dame corners are gonna have over 10 interceptions this year. I'm gonna actually say go a little bit more bold because they were like 8 last year because Benjamin had 6 of them.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say the Notre Dame corners have north of 12 interceptions as a group this year, and it's been a while since they've done anything like that. Like in 2021, they had 4. In 2020, they had 1.
Jeez.
Yeah, because they only had 7 as a team in 2020. In 2019, they only had 9 as a team. Like, interceptions has not been a bit. They had 15 in 2021, but Kyle Hamilton had 3, DJ Brown had 3, Jack Heiser had 2, Cam Hart had 2. 2018, your cornerbacks had, let's see, 4, 2, 3, 3. So this is a break from the norm for Notre Dame. Now, again, part of it is because Notre Dame hasn't had corners that play a lot of man coverage.
Sure.
Right. So I'm going to say definitely north of 10 for sure is going to be my bold prediction. And I won't be surprised.
That's still bold.
Yeah.
I mean,
and now when I'm referring to also the nickels as part of this. So like if Thomas Harper gets an interception playing in the nickel, that counts as for me as that. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Because 8 was a lot. Tandem. Based on all the numbers that you just gave, 8 was a lot. And you're
for Notre Dame, it is sure. Yeah. Yeah. For Notre Dame, it definitely is a lot. Yeah. But so that's one of my bolds.
I like that though. Turnover.
My second bold prediction is going to be this. Again, this is just having some fun with it, but Christian Gray is going to have multiple interceptions this season.
Oh,
yeah, that's my other one. Christian Gray is going to have multiple interceptions this year, I could see that happening. Part of that, Chance Tucker is going to have a game-clinching pass breakup in a big moment this year.
Oh,
those are my 2.
That's 3 bold predictions, buddy.
No, those are go together. Those are like
it feels like 3
from the second level guys. Hey, Vince, this is 1. I put a comma, not a period. That's 1. All right, you're done. Vince is out.
But no, that is big but also very possible because I do think that there are going to be games where those guys are going to get a lot of playing time. And what's going to be happening when those teams are behind? They're going to be throwing the football.
But also, if Chance is in the game, in a game-clinching situation, somebody went down. And he's got to step up and make a play.
That is true.
And I think, and it's more so looking at it from that standpoint. So that's my fun bold predictions.
Nice. I like it.
If I'm going to root for any of them not to come true, it's probably the one about Chance because that probably means somebody got hurt. Sure. But it's just, you know what it is, Vince? I've been saying this about Chance. I had Chance ranked pretty low in my class. You remember that? But remember, there's just something about this kid where my grade tells me he should be near the bottom of the class. But what my expression whenever I talked about Chance was, I just have a feeling this kid's going to make my grade of him look stupid at some point in time. I used to always say that. And I still feel that way when I watch him. I'm like, man, he's not super tall. He's not super strong. He's not super fast. But this kid just is a good football player. And I'm like, man, I think this kid might make me look stupid for my ranking of him. And I still have not given that up yet. So that's kind of where that part of that prediction came from as well. So
cool.
That's where it comes from.
All right. Well, that is our breakdown of the cornerback position. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share with your family and friends, Brian, because that's really important. Share with your family and friends. And but don't go anywhere because we will have at least a bit of a mailbag here. We've got some questions starred, kind of ready to go. So don't go anywhere. But make sure you join us next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast because we'll be back Monday with the recruiting hour at 1 o'clock.
Maybe.
John,
maybe.
Okay.
We have to see what Ryan's going to be like first day back, but also Sean Davis and I have a topic that we were both pretty fired up about before.
The one you were on the phone about? Yeah.
The one before that about the quarterback tiers. Sean and I are going to do a show about that. There's another stupid article that came out this week that had Sam Hartman as a tier 4 quarterback, and some of the guys ahead of him was just flat out stupid. And it wasn't even like they had Jordan Travis as a tier 4 quarterback as well. It's like, okay, you guys are just being trolls at this point. And this is a major national college football writer. This isn't like finding some like guy that wrote for some site that doesn't matter. This is a guy that's considered one of the top, college football writers around, and it just annoyed us. So we may call an audible on Monday and do recruiting hour on Tuesday. We'll see.
But either way, there's going to be a show at 1 o'clock. That's the important thing, people. Right. And if you're ever in flux, and if you ever don't know if there's going to be a show, that's what that little bell right there. You click that bell, and you will be notified when Irish Breakdown is live and in charge. And then, of course, there's the IB Nation Sports Talk at 6 o'clock on Monday as well. And that'll be me and Sean. And who knows what we're going to talk about? I don't know. We'll find out something good. I promise you. And then we'll have rapid fire. But, Brian, it is time for the mailbag.
Yeah.
So let's just jump into it.
Before we get to the actual questions, there was sort of a question that wasn't for the mailbag that I want to address.
Okay.
Antoine Johnson asked a question about my interceptions conversation. So that's a lot for a team that plays a lot of man. And he's correct. It's a lot for corners, period. It's a lot for two reasons why. Number one, I count the nickels as part of this conversation. I think nickels have a chance to get 2-3 interceptions minimum on their own this year, off tip passes and things along those lines, undercutting routes. There's a couple reasons for it. Number one is I think we Benjamin Morrison last year had 6 interceptions.
Right.
And they were all in man situations. I mean, he undercut a crossing route and picked the pass off against Clemson. That was his first pick. He perfectly played an underthrown deep ball, his second pick. He had 3 against Boston College. One is he was in man and he jumped the hitch route and picked it off. His next one was just great, just phenomenal coverage on a go route in the end zone. I think it was against Zay Flowers. I could be wrong on that. I don't quite remember if he might have forced an incompletion on Zay earlier in that drive as well, and then Zay got him once. But and then he got an overthrown ball. And so there's a couple reasons why I'm having the number where I am. And number one, I think Cam Hart's going to make a lot more plays in the ball this year. I think that teams were not afraid to challenge Benjamin Morrison last year.
Yep.
And that's partly why he had so many picks.
Sure.
I think you're going to see more teams throwing to the field this year. And I think I'm anticipating Cam making a lot more plays. I think the Cam we saw against Wisconsin is someone that I think is capable of being that guy, driving on curls, driving on ins, things like that. So I think he's going to make some more plays there. I also think that because of how good the corners are, we're going to see this Notre Dame team blitz more. And if they're good at it, and I think they're going to be better at it, and so we saw some things this spring, you're going to see teams rushing a lot of throws off outside. And that's where you get more interceptions from your corners.
Right. Tip
balls. You're going to have 3 corners on the field a lot. You're going to see a lot more rushed throws. And then the final piece is Notre Dame's if the offense is a factor in this as well, if the offense is as good as we think it's going to be, they're going to have a lot more leads this year, which means now you're playing a little bit more off. Now you're having some stuff late in the game as well. So those are the 3 factors that go into it. And then to answer his other question, Notre Dame also plays a lot of teams this year that throw the ball a lot. And obviously USC throws the ball a bunch. Ohio State throws the ball a bunch. Jeff Brom's the new coach at Louisville. They're going to throw the ball a bunch this year. So Robert and I being at NC State, Virginia in 2021 ranked 6th in college football in pass attempts. Number 3 was Purdue at 575. This past year, Purdue was 4th. USC was 9th. Well, the coach that was the Purdue play caller is now at Louisville. And so I think, and the guy that was at Virginia 2 years ago that led to them throwing 1 million footballs with Brennan Armstrong, him and Brennan Armstrong are now both at NC State. And then also, I'm gonna try to look up the Division I AA stats this year too, Vince. But you've got a guy that Stanford now is going to be in a situation where they're going to throw the ball a lot more as well, because they're going to be a spread team. They're going to have the quarterback they had 2 quarterbacks that played at Sacramento State, but one of them rushed for 1,000 yards. The other one was more of a passer. They don't really have a quarterback that throws the ball like that. And so I don't think that they're going to be able to run the ball quite as much. So I think they're a team that's going to play. A team that's going to play, to me, they're going to have to throw the ball more as well. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, is I just think, especially if you're winning a lot of these games, you're going to see Notre Dame be in situations, Vince, where teams are just going to have to throw the ball a lot more. So I'm looking at it now, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th, 11, 12, 13, 14. So Sacramento State last year was 15th in NCAA in 1AA in pass attempts. And that was with a quarterback that ran for 1,000 yards. So they're not going to have that this year. So they're going to have to be even more RPO oriented and things like that. So they play a lot of teams that throw the football this year. There's no doubt. So that factors into it as well. So I just wanted to clarify why I went with that number, because that is a very high number, obviously, but it's something that I think is capable of when you look at also the nickels. And again, it's a bold prediction.
And that's the point.
Right?
It's supposed to be bold. It's supposed to be a little out there, but within the realm of possibility. So
and at least be able to justify why you think that crazy bold prediction might happen. And that's where it comes from. It's just not like 10, or throwing darts. Okay, I landed on 10. I guess I'm going to go with 10. Right? So not doing that. But it is a fair point though that Antoine brought up. That's a lot of interceptions for a team that plays man coverage, and so I just want to explain why that's the case.
Got a super chat from Josh Miller. Thank you very much, Josh. Really appreciate that. For some ammo later and for all the content. Thanks for your honest takes.
I appreciate that. He must know that I'm going to the range after the show today.
Jeez.
I appreciate that, Josh.
Another super chat from Rob Osgood. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you guys for all the hard work. My question and comment is, with the potential increase in production from the defensive line and the linebackers, can the DBs become championship caliber or shut down Ohio State, USC, etc.?
Shut down? No. I mean, I don't think you shut down Ohio State. You don't shut down USC. You do what Michigan has done. You make enough stops to where your offense can go out there and win the game. And if you can be balanced and run the football and keep the ball away from them. I mean, look, Utah was able to go out there against USC in that second game and really dominate them. They still scored 24 points. You know what I mean, Vince? And that was after Utah gave up 42 points in the first time. They needed a first game to even get a look at USC, and then that helped them in the next game. So shut them down? No. Can you keep them in the 20s? That's the key. Now it's about what can your offense do? Can your offense play well enough to get you where you need to be? Those are going to be the keys for me.
Sure.
As I look at that, Vince.
Can they be championship caliber? Yeah, they can be championship caliber.
I think they were last year for most of the year. I mean, in my opinion, they certainly were against Ohio State.
Yeah.
The secondary was not the reason you lost Ohio State last year.
Agreed.
It was your front seven and your offense. That's what it boiled down to.
Yep. More the offense, I think, than anything else. But
yeah. Well, I mean, front seven not being able to get off the field in the second half, not being able to stop the run second half. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay, gotcha.
You limited the possessions of your offense to even have the chances to go out and make plays.
Take advantage of the opportunities they even had. Right. But yes, you are absolutely right.
Right.
D-Troll Hunter, thank you very much for the super chat. Little League World Series Fund. We're all too old for the Little League World Series, but I enjoy watching. It's one of my favorite things actually to watch on TV once they get to Williamsport, and I love watching the Little League World Series almost as much as I love watching the College World Series.
Okay. And then Nathan Milton's trying to be a troublemaker here, Vince, but I'll go ahead and let you read this and answer the question.
Nathan Milton, thanks for the super chat. Vince, who's the better athlete, Jalen Smith or Micah Parsons?
This is pre-injury.
Not even close. It's
pre-injury. Okay, thank you.
It's not even close.
Okay.
Micah Parsons is a great athlete. Don't get me wrong. Jalen Smith is not even in the same conversation.
Pre-athlete, Jalen Smith was a freak.
Yes.
An absolute freak. And Micah Parsons is as well, but Jalen was a different level.
Yep.
Ryan and I had a disagreement on that in a show.
What?
Once. And so
he's still employed here?
Hey, he hasn't been seen for 2 weeks. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. He'll be back. He's
Somebody
just on
will take that
paternity
seriously.
leave. Yeah, someone will take that seriously. But no, it look, I understand it, but yeah, I didn't agree with it. And so now, of course, people bringing it up to try to create a problem.
I see.
And that's what
I
Nathan
got you.
knows.
Well, you're not going to get a problem from me with
Good
you.
answer, Vince.
Maybe
Good answer.
Ryan, but
good answer.
from Jordan. Where would you rank Caleb Beasley, Christian Gray, and Benjamin Morrison at the same point in high school?
That's a good one. Okay, so Benjamin Morrison is number one. I mean, I had Benjamin Morrison as a dude. He is number one. Caleb Beasley's number two at the same age, and Christian Gray is number three. Now, Christian Gray had a big jump for me as a senior. So he is a guy that I thought as a senior, Vince was a much better football player than he was as a junior, at least in my eyes. Now, Notre Dame will tell you they liked him as a junior as well, which is why they recruited him as hard as they did. I just didn't see it quite to the level that they did as a junior. He was still very good, but just not quite to that level. They're all top 100. They all became top 100 players. Christian Gray became a top 100 player, but Beasley and Morrison were as juniors. Christian became one as a senior. So that's why when he says at the same point, so Christian Gray as a senior is better than Caleb Beasley was as a junior. Caleb Beasley as a junior was better than Christian Gray was as a junior, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
Benjamin Morrison was better than all of them. So fair question.
Good one.
And another one along the same lines, Vince, from Jordan.
Yeah, he says, where would Kingston rank at the same time of high school with Drake Bowen, Jaden Ausberry, or Jalen Sneed?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So of that group, I would probably put them third in that group as juniors. See, here it's hard to do. It's hard to do without context, because part of the reason I would have him lower is because those other guys have such incredibly high ceilings. Like the guy, honestly, that would rank the lowest as a junior amongst that group is Jalen Sneed. Because Jalen was always a toolsy, high upside guy, but he was also raw that needed a lot of work. Jaden Ausberry had a much higher floor, and Kingston has the highest floor of all these guys. I mean, Kingston's floor is higher than all these guys. I just think ceiling-wise, some of those other guys are better. So it's kind of hard. They're very different players. Where Kingston is like, that's what you get. I mean, and that's a good football player, and he is going to come in and he's more Junior 2 Alamaka, a more athletic version of Junior 2 Alamaka than he is Jaden Ausberry or Jalen Sneed or even Drake Bowen. Because as a junior, if you remember correctly, Vince, I loved Drake Bowen, but it was all about the upside. It was all about the tools. It wasn't until his senior year that he became Drake was an elite athlete that you loved the potential, but he was more of a athlete than he was a great football player. As a senior, he became a much better football player on top of the athleticism. Jaden Ausberry was always a great athlete, but a really smart, instinctive football player that just needed technical and weight room work. And then Jalen Sneed was just a freaky athlete that needed to learn how to play football. Or excuse me, needed to learn how to play linebacker.
Yeah.
Because he was a rush end as a junior in high school. He literally put his hand in the ground and rushed off the edge as a junior in high school. How do you compare that to a guy that's been playing middle linebacker at the best high school in America?
Right.
It's hard to compare that at this, the same age. So Kingston has the highest floor. He's a faster version of Junior 2 Alamaka. It's just, how are you evaluating it? Is it based on where they are now? If it's based on where they are right now, you could argue that Kingston should be number one. If I'm starting a high school football team and all these guys are juniors, who's my starting middle linebacker? It's going to be Kingston, because he's a more advanced high school football player. If you're going to include the upside part of it into the equation, you may drop him down to like third in that conversation. That's how I look at it, Vince. Have you had a chance to watch Kingston? I know you've been busy, but I didn't think you did yet.
No, I haven't. That's pretty bold words. I have a feeling that if you started him at Mike, you'd find some other spots for these other guys, though.
Sure. But again, we're talking about as juniors.
No. I get it.
Juniors.
No, I totally get it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Here's we actually had the same question twice, so we'll just go here.
Oh my goodness. M Go Irish. Name your top 3 Notre Dame cornerback tandems since 2000. That has to include 23, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you my top 3, not including them.
Okay.
Just to have some fun with the conversation. I think this year's tandem has a chance to be even better. But if I had to go with my best cornerback tandems, leading up to now, I would probably have to go with. You have the 2002 group of Vontez Duff and not Jerome Sapp, Vontez Duff and why am I drawing a blank on Shane Walton? Shane Walton. All right. Could not for the life of me.
Why am I drawing a blank on Shane Walton?
I was going to say, I was halfway through the sentence saying, why am I drawing a blank on the other corner? And then Shane Walton.
It was hilarious.
So it popped in.
It's really
it popped in. And so I know, right? Why am I forgetting on Shane Walton? You're not. You just said it.
Like, what are you talking?
No. That was a very good tandem.
Yes.
Obviously, the 2018 tandem was outstanding.
Yes, that was my first thought right there.
My next one is it's a battle between I'm torn between two tandems, Vince, and partly because one of the tandems was more of a trio. I thought the 2010 cornerback room at Notre Dame was really good. And if you remember that group, you had Gary Gray before he had the 2011 breakdown, and Gary Gray in 2010 was really good. You had Robert Blanton, and you had Darren Walls. That trio was outstanding for Notre Dame in 2010. And if we remember correctly, that defense went from being one that gave up 26 points a game the year before to 20. And especially by the end of the year, they were playing at a very high level, that trio. And so I really liked that trio of players. The other group that was but part of the reason I loved it is because Gary Gray and Robert Blanton especially were really good against the run. Okay. They combined for over 10 tackles for loss, that duo did in 2010. Not even counting Darren Walls, who was the best cover guy of that group. But Gary Gray had 5 tackles for loss that year, Vince, and Robert Blanton had 7.5. So you had 2 corners that had 12.5 tackles for loss. Right. And so I loved that one. And then the other one that I'm in that I had is the conversation to me. Their position coach, their defensive coordinator was a knucklehead. But that Kavari Russell Cole Luke tandem in 2015 was really good. Really good. And I think Kavari Russell's record in games he started in at Notre Dame was something like 31-6 or something like that. He was on some really good teams. So those are my corner tandems. Last year's tandem was really good, Vince, but they didn't finish the season together.
Right.
And they both had some ups and downs, especially with Cam. I don't know that I'd put last year's tandem in the top 3, to be honest with you. I think it has a chance to be number 1 after this year.
Yeah.
But I just think there was a little bit too much inconsistency early last year for me to really say it was number 1. Because those units were all very veteran groups. That's the other part, is those were experienced players in all those groups. So that would be my group to me, Vince.
I like it.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Not really. No, I'm with you on all of it. You're so much better with the history than I am. You're like,
well, I learned from the greatest to ever do that with Notre Dame history, right?
That's what I was going to say.
I've always been a guy that knew history and loved history, but like when you work with Lou Emoji, you've got to bring your A game, man, and it rubs off on you. You know what I mean? So there's like things that I'll say now, and I always try to credit, Lou when it's something I know that he told me.
Sure.
Because it made working easier, Vince. And I know you did some podcast stuff with him.
Sure.
I don't know how much you were in the office with him when you worked there.
Just the podcasts.
But I'd literally be sitting there writing an article about Torian Folston going, hey, Lou, where's Folston rank on the total yards for the first whatever? He's 4th behind, like it was Autry Denson, Vegas Ferguson, there's Walker. All right, thanks, Lou. That's how I did research.
Didn't even have to look up. It just yelled at the other cubicle.
Yeah. And that was one of the things when I left. I was like, man, I got to do my own homework. Fortunately, at the early on, I mean, Lou and I still remained friends until he passed. I could just call him and ask him, and he would give me the answer.
Right.
There was one time I was trying to remember. I was trying to find something. It was an obscure thing that you can't just look up in the stat book. So I called Tim Priester, and Tim and I were like, I don't know either. And it's like, this is why we needed Lou, because we would all both rely on Lou and be like, hey, man, this is why we miss many reasons why we miss Lou. But yeah, you have to bring your A game when you work with Lou Emoji if you're going to be talking about the history of Notre Dame football. So, yeah, good one. Very good question.
All right, from John, does the Notre Dame staff still have the same confidence level in the talent on the roster being able to make a run for a title after spring departures?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think all the spring departures were at best a 1B in Logan Diggs, and the rest were 2s. So I don't think that I think that the staff would, I don't know the answer to this, but I would imagine that there's a thought of, well, if we have an injury, sure, maybe we're not as prepared to deal with a quarterback injury. But yeah, I think that there's still a lot of confidence in that group.
I'm trying to decide, like, from the guys that left, like, why, where would it be where their confidence would drop?
Running back would be my only one.
Yeah, agreed.
Just because there's so much uncertainty
from the injury standpoint. Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. And they know more about that than we do, but I know there's question marks still there.
Yeah. You're not worried about losing Lorenzo Styles.
Right.
And you're worried about losing Tyler Buckner for 24, or if there's an injury.
Correct.
But yeah, if there's an injury at quarterback, that's going to be something that is, yeah, boy. But you don't go into the years like, I don't know if we're going to win because if this guy gets hurt, we're in trouble.
You can't think that way. Like,
I don't think that's the case.
You can't think that way. So yeah, I think their confidence is still where it was.
At least it is in my conversations. That hasn't changed at all. So, I mean, it's a fair question. Look, it's
an
a different looking roster
question
now than it was before.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go Irish, which Notre Dame cornerback he's sticking on topic here. I like this. Which ND cornerback performed better at the NFL level than you expected, and one who underperformed your expectations?
That's a good, it's hard for me because I don't really pay attention to the NFL. Even when I watch the NFL, I watched it more as a fan of my team.
Then not exactly across the entire NFL.
I've never been like I was always a big Broncos fan, and when I was a kid, I would follow it. But like as an adult, like I don't know what Bennett Jackson did in the NFL. I have no idea. I don't know what Brock Williams did in the NFL. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you honestly how most of those guys did. So I say Bobby Taylor. Maybe it performed better, but he ended up moving to safety. I didn't think Tom Carter was as good as where he was drafted, I guess. I mean, that's about the best I could come up. I just don't, again, I don't know how guys did. I mean, Julian Love's been pretty good, but what I say he's been better than I expected. I don't.
And Troy Pride is still playing right now.
He tore his ACL and hasn't been signed yet. So, yeah. But
see, there, more than I did.
Yeah. But that's just because I care about Troy, not because I care about the NFL,
Sure.
But I honestly don't know that I've paid enough attention to have answers. I'll tell you one who underperformed. Kavari Russell did almost nothing in the NFL. That surprised me. I thought he'd be at least a decent rotation guy. He spent very little time in the NFL. I thought he would have been a little bit better, but other than that, I couldn't tell you. I can tell you who underperformed because the guys didn't do anything. But I think Brock Williams was like a 3rd round pick, and he played 2 years. That's not great. Who did better? I don't know. I didn't watch enough. I mean, I don't know. I was going to try to guess, but I just don't even want to guess because I just don't know enough about it.
No, I get that.
But yeah, you're talking to the wrong guys for NFL knowledge. Right?
I mean, I watch the NFL the same way you do. Number one, I bet on it because I think it's fun, and the other one is I watch my team. I don't really keep.
Never bet on NFL, and I don't even watch my team anymore. So I might this year. Who knows? We'll see what my Sundays look like, but I'm usually pretty busy on Sundays, as you know.
From Archer, which position group is in the best spot for the next 3 years, and which group needs the most work? Okay,
that's a very good question. Which position group needs the most work is the easiest. That's safety.
Okay, that's
Easily
fair.
safety.
That's
I mean, there's
absolutely fair.
no other position that needs as much work right now as the
Right.
safety position.
Yeah.
Which one's in the best positions are actually a little bit more challenging because there's some that there's some that are really good. I would have to say here's who, and this pops off my head
Sure.
as the ones that are in the best position moving forward. I'd have to say wide receiver.
Okay.
That's one. I would have to say running back now
Yep.
that they have Keidron Young. That's another one because you've got Jadarian 1 year, Jeremiah the next, Jaron and Jabron 1 year, Jeremiah the next. All those guys enter the season with 4 years of eligibility left. Plus you have Aeneas and Keidron in the next class. And the other one would probably be linebacker. Vince, I think
okay.
linebackers. I mean, you still have Snead and Ziegler from the 22 class. I think they have great potential. The freshman class is outstanding. Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak. I saw pictures of them and of a video of them kind of getting off they're long as heck. They're talented. As long as Al Golden doesn't kind of screw this recruiting thing up the next 2 years, I think running linebackers in the conversation. I don't want to say tight end because I don't think tight end is quite there yet with some of the injuries. Offensive line, part of me wants to say offensive line because there's some really talented players, but I'm concerned about the tackle position. Okay. I'll say this. If they get Gearby Lambert, I'm putting the offensive line in this conversation of three best. But without them, said corner. That's the other one. That's my third, corner.
My three were wide receiver, running back, and corner. Those are my three big ones. And it honestly, if Tyler Buckner was still here, it would have been quarterback, but he's not. And so there's a big gap in there. You can't say 3 years. Like maybe somebody steps up and they knock it out of the park next year, but I still feel like there's a gap at quarterback. Otherwise, I would have picked quarterback as one of mine as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Because we haven't seen any of those guys.
Sure. No, I get it. Yeah.
It's hard for me to kind of get too fired up about it.
It's just amazing how different a roster can look in 3 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're talking 25. I mean, that can look a lot different than it does right now.
That's why you're looking at the 23 and 24 classes primarily.
Sure.
Is really what the focus is on.
Right.
All right. Good questions here. Let's go to this one from Joe.
All right, Joe, thank you very much for the question here. How's Christian Gray looking? Any chance we see him as a starter or significant contributor? And that's the question I was referring to when we were talking about Christian Gray earlier.
It's possible. It's definitely possible. He's a guy that you look at and say he has the talent to play as a freshman. It's going to be hard for him to be a starter simply not because it has zero to do with his talent. It's like, look who he has to beat out. I mean, so it would require an injury for him to start. That's the problem, right? And so, but if there's any scenario in which Christian Gray is starting for your cornerback this year, I'm gonna feel okay.
Yeah,
right. Like he may have a tough time with the elite guys, as most freshmen do, but he can play. I'd be okay there. And corner's one of those positions where if you have he's got a really good football mind. He's a smart kid. He's not just he's not just getting by on 4.3 speed, and he's 6'2". I mean, he's got some instincts to him. Like one thing I was looking at when I was letting Archer know kind of the Wikipedia was incorrect and that Ahmad Gardner was a freshman All-American. Right. One of the things you look at and you're like, you see that Ahmed Gardner or Sauce Gardner was an all academic kid his freshman year. Doesn't surprise me because he plays smart. He's not just long and athletic and fast. He's smart. Benjamin Morrison's smart. You can see that with Cam Hart, with Christian Gray, there's some intelligence there at that position. And they've been playing it a long time. And so where Cam Hart's got to kind of learn that stuff because he played corner in high school, but it's just like, hey, go cover that guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't being taught really how to play cornerback the way that Benjamin Morrison was, whose dad played in the National Football League and was a Division I football player as a safety, as a defensive back. And so he's still come along, but Christian has all that, but he's also athletic and really long. I mean, he's got it all, other than you'd like him to have 15 more pounds of weight. I mean, if you think Benjamin was skinny, wait till you see Christian Gray. You know what I mean? Like he's even skinnier than Benjamin was. So,
right.
But significant contributor, that I definitely think he's got a shot to be this year.
Well, you predicted he was going to have 2 interceptions. So to me, that qualifies as a significant contributor.
Well, it could be two fourth quarter interceptions against Tennessee State. And
it could be. But You get multiple interceptions, I feel like you're on the field for a reason.
Agree. Yep.
One you can explain away.
We answered the first part of this question, Vince, so let's just go to the second part of the question.
Sure. From Archer, and just for the listeners, the first part was who's going to start at slot corner. We talked about that. When OSU puts Marvin Harrison Jr. in the slot, will Ben or Cam shadow him, or will they leave the slot corner on him?
They'll probably leave the slot corner on him. Notre Dame's not really a shadow team.
Never have been.
What it would be is, okay, we're just going to lock you down at those. So if you're going to put your number 2 and number 3 corners receivers on our number 1 and our number 1s at corner, then we feel we can handle those guys one-on-one. So then it becomes, now if you want to put Marvin in the slot, that's going to make it easier for us to shadow him over top with a safety and a nickel. That's easier. That's easy to say schematically. It's another thing to actually defend him, right? Because that's why he's the best receiver in college football. But I mean, to me, if that's a good thing for Notre Dame, if they're going to put him in the slot, because you can run linebackers underneath them, you can have a cornerback mirroring over the top. There's things that you can do.
Yeah,
I'm much more concerned about him being outside and being in one-on-ones where, look, he only has to beat you twice and it's 100 yards. I mean, or 70 yards or 60 yards or big plays, and so they're gonna stick with him being on the nickel safeties and those type of guys.
Sure.
Your coverage might be altered, but you're not going to be altered from a game standpoint.
Michael Parks, who are you putting your money on at right guard to start? I mean, for me, it's Andrew Kristofic. That's who I'm going to put my money on right now. Could that change? Sure. But I think he's going to get the first crack at it. And I don't know that he's going to give it away, but we'll see. I mean, but that's who I put my money on.
For game 1, that's where my money is as well. I just think Rocco Spindler has, based on what we saw from Rocco late in the year, based on what we saw, what I've heard about Rocco, he's going to battle.
Good.
And it could be a situation where, maybe one guy starts the year and another guy finishes it. I could see that. But in these situations with an offensive line, I always go with the veteran. But the unique situation with this is, you go with the veteran. But in this particular instance, you do have a new offensive line coach.
Sure.
And so he's going to have much more of an open mind about who's going to be that guy than maybe another coach would.
Right.
So, that's going to be interesting. So, but I think it'll be Kristofic start, but I just don't know that it's a scare. I'm not as locked into it as you are, and I'm not as sold that he's going to keep the job as you are.
Now, I'm not saying he's going to keep it. I will say that I'm pretty darn sure he's going to start the year there. I would not be shocked if there was a timeshare situation as well. Kind of how they did it when they won the Joe Moore Award, but I think he's going to start there.
Yeah.
Army 72. What's your your opinion and your understanding of ND's status on linebacker Keyshawn Flowers? He seems to jump off the film to me as the quickest and most explosive linebacker I've ever seen, including SEC recruits.
He said, I've seen this year.
Oh, okay. You're right.
So I've seen this year. That adds a little bit different flavor to it.
It's like, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
you're right.
He's definitely the most explosive on Notre Dame's board. I don't have a clue. Honestly, folks, I wish I did. I don't have a clue where Notre Dame stands with Keyshawn Flowers. I know they love his athleticism. They went and saw him multiple times during the visit periods. I don't know what he thinks about Notre Dame. No clue. We've never talked to him. What I know is the other part of it too, Vince. I believe he is from the Maryland area. That's another thing that gives me concern. Yes, he's from Archbishop Spalding. It's another thing that gives me pause. But honestly, I'll be honest with you, Army
standpoint, is that what you're referring to?
No. Just they don't do well in that area.
Oh,
they just, for whatever reason, they have a hard time.
Gotcha.
Cam Hart's from there, and but they just have a hard time getting a lot of traction with those schools, which is weird because it's a lot of Archbishop Spalding. And you'd think that's a kid that's going to look at Notre Dame. They just usually don't. I believe he's visiting next weekend. I believe is when he's scheduled to visit. But honestly, when I see a kid's going to visit or Notre Dame's offered a kid, I look at his stats. I try to look for his bio. I look up I go to the On3 page because you can see where he's ranked. And I'm like, seriously? Like, you're bringing in a kid that rivals an ESPN having ranked, and he's like the 3-star, and he's the 36 linebacker according to On3 and 45 to 247. And you're like, well, They're reaching the bottom of the barrel on this one. Like that man is golden, man. It's recruiting how Golden's doing. It's a problem. Then you pop on the film and you're like, well, can I take that back, please? Can I erase everything I just said in the last 2 minutes in my own head? This kid is explosive. He is very fast. He's very physical. The problem is he's small. He's like 6'1", 215. And that 215 might be stretching it a little bit, Vince, but he is we'll pop on the film. He's an explosive guy, but he's powerful too. Like when he hits you, dudes go back. And he's got some of that really powerful coil like Tavon Coney had. So remember, Tavon wasn't really big coming out of high school either. Now, he put on weight at Notre Dame, and not all of it was like the best weight in his belly, but Tavon was a pretty jacked up dude, like chest and arms and stuff like that. And, but he wasn't a real big guy coming out of high school either. But this kid is really twitchy and explosive, and he's fluid, he's loose, and he's a guy that brings a lot of, a lot of power, a lot of coil. He's just not a real big guy. And you question, how his fit inside, but man, he can freaking run. And if you're going to take a flyer on a kid, he's a kid to take a flyer on. And you just hope that Matt Balis can work a miracle. But if you're talking about just dudes can flat out run, this dude can flat out run. The reason I like Chris Cole more is because Chris Cole can also run, but he's 6'3", 210, 215 pounds, and he's going to be 235, when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
But this kid is really, really explosive athletically. I don't know a lot about where Notre Dame stands with him, to be honest with you. So wish I did. We'll work on that, but I just don't. But the film part, Army, we're on the same page. We're on the same page.
Travis Shuttlesworth, if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, who do you want your protected rivalries to be? And I'm sure you've dove into this, right? You know how the new Big Ten.
Oh yeah, dove into it. Yes, correct. I didn't dove into it on our show. We haven't talked about it.
No. I just didn't know if you knew how all that was going to work.
I did that yesterday. Last night. Cool. I finally did it. I hadn't had time up until last night, but
we talked about it on last night's show.
Yeah.
So that's So we had this discussion on last night's show actually. So I'll let you kind of go first, since I kind of already put out there what I wanted to say about it.
I'm assuming Michigan was in that conversation for you. It's not for me. Mine's Purdue and Michigan State. That's the only two I care about. Purdue and Michigan State.
Mine was USC only.
Well, I think that kind of is already a given.
Well,
and I still forget they're in the Big Ten.
Protected because they're in the Big. If
USC,
first of all,
so you throw USC in with those two. I still forget that USC is going to the Big Ten.
Well, and it's ridiculous, but
throw
that's the only one I would
because you have some people have three, right?
Some people do. Some people have none. Penn State has 0.
Here's my thing. I've said this before. I don't really care about playing Purdue and Michigan State all the time. I would always play one of them every year. I think those are the two rivalries that matter. Let me just finish.
Okay.
Those are the two that I know I interrupt you all the time. I'm being super hypocritical here, but just let me finish my thought first before you disagree with me and know what you're going to disagree with.
You. I was going to give you more information.
Michigan State and Purdue are two that I've always said. Those are teams I would always play one of them every year if I'm scheduling Notre Dame as an independent. Those are the two, right? And so I've always said I want to play one of those two every year. Those are the Big Ten rivalries that I've only ever cared about. I've never cared about the Michigan rivalry. I hate Michigan. I despise Michigan. I don't want to give Michigan the potential clout of beating Notre Dame. I just and I don't get a lot out of beating them because I hate them and whatever the case may be. I've always respected the Michigan State series because I know the history of Michigan State was one of those teams that had Notre Dame's back when they were trying to get into the Big Ten. They were one of the ones pushing back against Michigan's anti-Catholic bigotry and all those type of things back in the day when they were trying to get in. And I've always respected the Purdue series of the Big Ten rivalries. Those are the only two that I would care about on top of USC. And you can do up to 3, right? Didn't I see it? It's from 0 to 3.
Well, you can put as many as you wanted on there. The most that they ended up giving out was 3.
Okay, because I saw some, like Penn State has none.
Right.
Which I thought was silly.
Iowa has 3.
Yeah.
But that means Penn State didn't ask for any. Gotcha. So that's the way they did it. So you got to submit, who do you want to play? If both teams did it, then you got it. That seems to be how it
I think it's kind of so Penn State literally didn't ask for anybody.
Or nobody reciprocated and said they wanted Penn State. Ohio State has 1. It's Michigan. That's it.
And that's really only it. I mean,
So but here's the thing.
I think it's chicken crap that those two teams, both Penn State and Ohio State, didn't both want to play each other. I think that's chicken crap. I'm like the how's Penn State and Maryland not a protected rivalry like that? This is the reason I hate the Big Ten. I freaking hate the Big Ten so much. Like
Well,
Rutgers and
here's the deal,
Maryland is a rivalry they're going to protect. Like who the freaking how's that a rivalry? Does until yesterday, Vince, did you have any clue that freaking Maryland and Rutgers were a rivalry?
Nope. I usually forget they're part of the Big Ten, if I'm being honest with you. So
stupid.
Here's the deal. The reason I only pick USC, okay? There's a reason. Because the way the Big Ten is doing their scheduling, you play every single team in the Big Ten once every 2 years.
I get that.
And I don't want to play all those other teams every year. So, like, if Purdue, Michigan State, you're still going to play them every other year. So why protect it and play them every year? That's silly.
Because to me, I think there's 0 point in being in a conference if you're not going to play some teams every year. I think it doesn't help you if you don't know who you're going to play. That should be part of the benefit of being in a conference is we got to prepare for and recruit against and beat these teams. The more teams that you can add to your schedule that every year we play them, we're going to get them, we at least know what we can do against them, the better it is for you. I think it's silly to only have like you're getting rid of divisions. I hate this notion of getting rid of divisions. I mean,
I don't.
To me,
the divisions in the Big Ten were terrible.
I don't care about. Then make the divisions better. But to me, every year, as much as you dislike the Big Ten, you're going to get Ohio State, Michigan. You're going to get Ohio State, Penn State. You're going to get Michigan, Michigan State. You're going to get Ohio State and Michigan State. You're going to get Penn State and Michigan State. You're going to get Iowa, Wisconsin, right? So there's at least some games you can somewhat look forward to. So fix the divisions, make the divisions better. But I like the fact that every year you're going to play these 4 or 5 teams every year. I think there's value to that. I think it's gone too far where you've got 9 teams. You're playing the same 9 teams every year. I don't necessarily love that. I liked it better when conferences were only 8, 9 teams and you had 7 teams and you had to play more out of conference games. But to me, I want at least 3 games in this model that I know every year we're going to play them here or there. We know there's some consistency to it. So that's what I would rather do. And again, those are 2 rivalries that I've always
I get it.
Appreciated and respected.
They would have been first on my list. I just don't want to play them every year. So it's just not the way I would do it. USC would be the only one that I would protect. So, because I'm going to play all of those teams. I'm going to play them all. So
I understand that, Vince.
Yeah.
But the point is you're now run the risk of putting yourself in the hands of the Big Ten to say they're not going to screw you and give you what's the rule about home and away, right? Like, so every time you play Michigan State, they're going to make you go to East Lansing, or every time you play, you know what I mean? So like there needs to be some level.
Within a 4-year span, you play home and away. They already said that. So it's
4 years you're going to play Michigan State. First of all, I don't go to the Big Ten anyway.
Well, no,
but I think
the caveat
not having more teams that you're going to play, to me, does not help you as a program. It doesn't. You need to have some consistency to who you're going to play every year, and
that's
I
why
think that's something helps you.
Other people in the chat from last night and today, they're like, "Well, the protected rivalry should be, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State." No, why would you do that? Because then what?
Why would you not have USC on there?
Well, and USC, okay, fine, yeah, and USC. Those 4, why would you play all 4 of those teams every single year? That's dumb. Because what is the incentive then for your 3 non-conference games? One of those is going to be Navy. So now you have 2 other non-conference games. Why would you go out? Why would you go out and schedule, a top SEC, a top Big 12, whatever the case may be? What's the point? Because you're going to play those 4 top teams every single year.
Which is why those teams are not part of my protected class.
Right.
When I think of a rivalry, I'm looking at it from there's some tradition to that rivalry. Everybody talks about Michigan and Ohio, and Michigan and Notre Dame are like, oh, that's a great rivalry. Is it? Right? Is it really? Like, okay, maybe in the 80s, but that's not a rivalry that has a lot of length to it, especially compared to Purdue and Michigan State. I mean, if you just look at the numbers. Notre Dame has played Purdue 85 times.
Mm-hmm.
They've played Michigan State 77 times. They've played Michigan, 43 times. Because Michigan refused to play them for decades.
I was going to say, most of those games were back in the early 1900s.
Right. They've played 42 times. And this is what's funny when Michigan fans are like, oh, we dominate that series. I'm like, oh, sure. If you do things that happened before my great grandfather was alive, yeah, sure. You dominated that series. Good on you. Yeah, they won every game from 1887 to 1908. Then Notre Dame beat them in 1909, and then Michigan stopped playing them. Then they played again in during World War II because they just needed to play each other. They played a home and home then, or they played 2 games then. And then they didn't play each other again until the year I was born, 1978. So they went 33 years without playing, then another 35 years without playing. And then they started to play each other somewhat regularly in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I just don't care about that series. I don't respect Michigan. I don't like Michigan. I have zero desire to play Michigan. I have zero desire to give Michigan that
absolutely.
But say, oh, we're a rival with Notre Dame. No, you're not, because we don't care about you. That's how I look at
Rivalry goes both ways.
Right. We don't care about you. That's how I view Michigan. I don't care. You go play Michigan State, you go play Ohio State, that's your rivalries. We're not your rival. We've played Purdue almost twice as many times as you. We've played Michigan State way more than we've played you. They're not the anti-Catholic bigots that kept us out of the Big Ten multiple times, right? And so you screwed us, so we went out and on our own became the premier program in college football for decades. Now you want to tap into that now that we're a big-time program. Screw you. That's basically how I've always viewed Michigan.
Yep.
And that's why I've never respected Michigan. And so to me, geographically, it makes a lot of sense to play Purdue. Respect, it makes a lot of sense to play Michigan State. That's where I'm coming from. I could not care less about whether or not Notre Dame plays Michigan. Don't care.
Me either. Oh,
don't
me
care
either. Yeah. And I desperately, with everything that I have in myself, do not want to be in the Big Ten. For all of the reasons that you just said. I don't want to have anything to do with the Big Ten. So we'll answer the question, but I hope that never comes to fruition.
Sure. Absolutely. And Antoine, if you're going to have a comeback, make something better than what you're coming back with, because you're not even responding to what I actually said. So when you actually respond to what I actually said, then I will engage you in the conversation, but at least respond to what I've said. But yeah, there some of these things too with the Big Ten, Vince, it's just kind of like, when does this change in 2 years when they add 2 more teams, or in a year when they add 2 more teams, or are those teams just going to Washington and Oregon are just their own rivals and then they just add 2 more teams?
Right.
That's the other part. And when you do expand to 18 to 20 teams, are you still going to tell me I'm going to be able to play X number of teams every other year when you add 4 more teams in the league? How does that become mathematically possible?
Mm-hmm.
That's the other part of it. So, this is all going to get shooken up in a couple years anyway if the Big Ten expands to 20, which is what they're trying to do, correct?
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
So, seriously, how do you make that work if they add more? Like, you can make it work now.
Too big.
Right. What they need to do is go to, okay, we're up 20 teams. We have an Eastern division or whatever division, then this division, and then, like what's going to end up happening, Vince, or at least what I think should happen, is these 2 conferences get so big that they end up just kind of then splitting the conferences up into some of the old divisions. You know what I mean? Like,
you end up being different
24
names,
teams. Yeah, we're up to 24 teams now. So we're going to split them into 3 divisions of 8 teams. You basically just have 3 conferences. You have the conferences of the 1980s all over again.
Right.
They're just now under umbrella of 2 leagues, and it's just stupid. It's just stupid. Also, so it's like, this is what's so dumb. How about we just, like, if somebody said, what if you could like be conference, you could be commissioner of, you were football king became football king, and I could make whatever decisions I would want. I'd say, okay, every TV deal that we sign, this is the one model that I would take from everybody wants, let's make college football like the NFL. That's stupid. I don't want to be the NFL, except for one thing. Whatever TV deals we sign with ESPN or CBS or NBC or whatever, it all goes to a pot that gets broken up by this amount to Power 5 teams and this amount to Group of 5 teams. Notre Dame will then count as a Power 5 team. And so from a TV revenue standpoint, yes, we have these 60 whatever Power 5s. We're gonna have them in smaller conferences. We're gonna go back to the Southwest Conference. We're gonna go back to the Big 8. We're gonna go back to the original Big 10. We're gonna bring the Big East back. We're gonna bring the ACC back to what it was. We're gonna have the SEC smaller, and then we're gonna go back to, but because you're all making money anyway, you're all making the same amount of money anyway. So there's no need for you to be part of the SEC if you're Arkansas. The only reason you went to the SEC anyway was for money. The only reason Texas and Oklahoma are going to the SEC is for money. So go back, put Texas back in the Southwest Conference, put Oklahoma back in the Big 8. Why didn't Nebraska go to the Big 10, Vince? What's the reason? That's it. So we're going to put them back in the Big 8. We're going to bring back those rivalries. We're going to do all the stuff. USC, you don't need to worry about this because you're going to make the same amount of money anyway, whether you're in the Pac 8 or the Pac 10 or the Big 10. And we can go back to making some common freaking sense. And then now all your non-football sports are in much more smart, not stupid conferences that make way more sense geographically. It takes far less wear and tear on your non-football. Because here's the thing, for football, it doesn't matter. You travel 6 times a year. That's it in the regular season.
Maybe.
Sometimes not even
Sometimes not even that many.
And then sometimes, like if you're like a USC and you play UCLA every year, one of you is just driving on a bus.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. Now, but with your other sports, they got to travel a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
So you're telling me I don't give a rip about the wear and tear and the emotional and physical and academic well-being of my other students because of the football money we're making. All right, so let's go back to where we're gonna bring these 65 teams into a division and maybe kick some of them out, right? I mean, okay, cool. I don't care about that, but whatever. Everybody's gonna make the same amount of money because we're gonna sign a deal as one entity. I think that's one of the first things that would happen if I got rid of the NCAA and it's the Driscoll football, league. First thing we're doing, if you're part of this, we're gonna sign all these big deals with CBS and NBC and whatever the case may be. But everybody gets paid. It's a rev share just like the professional football leagues in that regard. And then I'm going back to the old conferences, right? And see, because here's what the thing was. When some said, well, hey, we want to be an independent again, right? Like we don't want to be in a conference again. We want to go back to being an independent. Why? Because the only reason we joined the Big Ten anyway, Penn State, is because of the TV revenue. We want to go back to being an independent. Or maybe they would go back to the Big East. Whatever the case may be, that to me would be the best thing to do that gets rid of all the stupidity of these giant conferences. And why is USC in a league? Like how far here? Hold on a second, Vince. Let me look this up. Let's go to Los Angeles to Columbus distance and see how much this is. All right. Why is USC in a conference with a team that is 2,200 miles away from them? And that's just Ohio State.
As I say, what about Rutgers?
Right. What's Piscataway? Aren't they in Piscataway? Isn't that where Rutgers is? Right.
Yeah.
So let's look at that one. Why is USC in a conference with a team that is 2,700 miles away from them? This is stupid.
It's ridiculous.
It's stupid. And so that would fix it. And that's why one hope is if they do get rid of the NCAA and college football falls under sort of one umbrella of Power 5. That's one of my hopes, is that conferences lose their power from a TV negotiating standpoint. Now, I know right now it's protected. I believe there's some like Supreme Court decisions and all that protects that opened up the opportunity for them to negotiate on their own. It used to be where that was the case, where the NCAA would keep a lot of that money. But if I'm running it like a professional league from a TV business standpoint, we're going to still care about academics and all that, but just from a TV standpoint, we're going to run it more like a business. And then we're going to give this money. We're going to negotiate all of you. We're going to give you whatever percentage we need to give you. We just need the money we need to hire people and run all of this, right? And we don't need it we don't need this TV revenue to pay for all these other sports. It's just, this is for college football, college basketball. We're going to break it up evenly like a rev share. That's what I would do. And then you guys can work out your own deals for maybe, start your own this, start your own that. And that's how you can make more money and those type of things. But from a TV deal contract, we're breaking it up all even. I think that would allow us to go back to some sanity in college sports. There'd have to be some laws passed and all that other kind of stuff. And you'd have to get away from the NCAA. But that's something I would absolutely look for, in my opinion.
Mailbag question from Nathan. Is Notre Dame still very much in the mix for Caleb Beasley?
Yes, absolutely. He's got an official visit scheduled for September. Notre Dame is very much a player for that one. So, yes, they are still in the mix for that.
Irish Mills 540. Which recruit gives Notre Dame's future the best chance of changing the program in terms of wins and losses, recruiting, overall program growth? A, CJ Carr. B, Justin Scott. C, Elijah Rushing. Or D, Cam Williams. This is an easy one, isn't it?
It's CJ Carr.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just because of the nature of the position and the nature of the fact that he is also the lead recruiter for Notre Dame in the 24 class as well, and the 25 class for that matter. I mean, he's recruiting his butt off, and he's the quarterback. And, just like in games, when you are talking about a game, quarterback gets way too much credit and also way too much blame when they lose, right? And so it's the quarterback position, period. Offensive players want to play with it. There's a reason that Notre Dame has one of the best offensive recruiting classes in the class of 24. It's because of CJ Carr.
Right.
They want to play with a good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the nature of the position, Vince, and it's not that those guys aren't important. It's not. I mean, Justin Scott's a very important recruit. Elijah Rushing would be huge to pick up. It's just the nature of quarterback and the aspect of that this has been such a problem position for Notre Dame for so long. That's the other part of it too, is a quarterback can impact. I mean, look, put it like this. You have a much better shot of a big-time five-star defensive lineman wanting to play with a big-time quarterback than you have of a big-time quarterback deciding, I'm going to go play somewhere where this defensive tackle is signed.
Mm-hmm.
This is the nature of it.
Yep.
Receivers aren't going to say, hey, man, I want to go play with that guy. Who are you talking about? Yeah, that defensive tackle. No, they want to go play with the quarterback. Offensive linemen want to protect the quarterback. Defensive players want to say, that's my dude. It's just the nature of the position. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Notre Dame is recruiting as well as it is on offense right now. I think you said this the other day, Vince, when we were talking about it. It's maybe it was Sean. I forget who it was, but it was like, hey, it's not a coincidence that Notre Dame is killing it in offensive recruiting ever since CJ Carr committed.
Right.
Just think about who's committed to Notre Dame since CJ Carr. I believe Braylon James is the only receiver Notre Dame had in the class in 2023 when CJ Carr committed. I think he was the only one. So they've signed Jaden Greathouse, Rico Flores, Caleb Smith, Cam Williams, because Cam Williams committed shortly after. Actually, Cam Williams committed before most of the 23 receivers committed to Notre Dame, I believe.
He's been in the
at least
for a long time.
I'm trying to remember when he actually publicly committed. But Cam was basically committed to Notre Dame almost immediately. Yeah, June 29th is when Cam committed to Notre Dame. June 29th, so we're coming up on almost a year when he committed. And Jaden Greathouse was the second receiver. He committed July 15th. So Cam committed before all of last year's receivers, all of this year's receivers, before Jack Larson. And why did a lot of those guys pick Notre Dame? Before Jeremiah Love, before all of them. Why? CJ Carr has a big role in that. It's not the only reason, but it's a big reason. Why? So if Justin Scott would have committed a year ago, which I wish he would have, would it have an impact? Sure, it'd have an impact, but it's not going to have the kind of impact that a guy like CJ Carr can have.
No.
That would be my 2 cents on that one. So, yep. So here, this is a silly comment. I'm sorry, Archer. Indy can't be the only one who gets to play games across the country. If you're making all the other teams play regional conferences, got to be consistent, make Notre Dame do the same. Notre Dame does mostly play regional teams. You can play whoever you want in the non-conference. We're not talking about football here. Notre Dame has been mostly in a regional conference most of its existence when it comes to sports. It was in a mostly regional conference in the Big East, and it's a mostly regional conference in the ACC. They're all in the same – all the teams Notre Dame plays are in the same time zone.
Exactly, and that's the difference. Somebody was making an argument that, well, Miami's 1,300 miles away, but they're in the same time zone.
That's one team, right? But you're talking about every team in the Big Ten, Ohio, USC, and you should have to travel to play over thousands of miles. Notre Dame. Hey guys, Notre Dame to Pitt is a 5-hour drive. Vince and I could literally finish this show on a Friday if Notre Dame's playing at Pitt and arrive in Pitt in a car in time to go have dinner at a restaurant before it closes. Yeah. Like seriously.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in this guy. If Notre Dame was, you look at Michigan or Ohio State and all the teams, they got to occasionally travel over to New Jersey and all that kind of stuff. Literally every game. And we're not talking about football. It's not football.
Exactly.
What did I say was the problem? It's not that USC's football team has to make that trip. We said very clearly, this isn't a big deal for football teams because you only got to make 5 trips a year. It's the other sports that this completely screws
cross country.
Over.
It's tennis.
Exactly.
All of those other sports. Yeah.
So to say, every team in the country can fly across the country if they want to. It's called a non-conference game. But you don't have to play the same teams non-conference in every sport. You just do it for football. So if Ohio State wants to go play in Arizona every year and play in California every year and play in Washington every year or go to Hawaii or play in Venezuela or play in Japan or play in Russia or play in Britain or wherever else they want to freaking play, they can do that. It's called a non-conference game. Schedule them all you want. Go for it. But you're asking these teams to do this every single week and every single road game for the non-football sports. And again, football is played on the weekends. They leave on a Friday.
That's not the case
right?
for everything else.
Basketball team is gone for an entire week because they're making their East Coast swing. Right? That's a lot to ask of these student athletes.
Right.
I don't care about football. Football's not the big problem here. It's stupid that USC and UCLA would be in those conferences. Hey, newsflash, Archer. You get to play one of those Pac-12 teams at the end of every season, number one. Number two, you can schedule USC every year if you want to, and UCLA every year if you want to, as a non-conference game. Go at it. Have at it. Have fun with that. But it shouldn't be where they're part of the same league, and you only have to play those teams. And you're looking at it from a Big Ten standpoint. Try looking at it from a USC standpoint, where every time they get on the road, they got to travel. These are long flights. Forget drives. You know, I'm sorry, that's not good for these young people, and that's the angle.
The fact that anybody in USC or UCLA thinks this was a good idea from a well-being standpoint,
they don't. But they don't care, Vince.
Oh, I know, and
it's just they don't care.
It is so blatantly obvious that they don't care.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you could almost hide it with some of these other teams coming into conferences and things like that, but the USC UCLA thing is just. It's ridiculous.
And like people point to a team here, a team there. Number one, Notre Dame doesn't play Miami very often. Number one. And number two, you can pick a team or two. You guys don't understand this. Isn't this one team? They're all that way for USC and UCLA.
Right.
And our problem isn't what it does to the Big Ten teams. They only have to make that trip like once.
Right.
We're talking about for what it does for the USC and UCLA kids. They have to do it every single time they go play a road game.
Right.
It's thousands of miles away, a different time zone, completely jacks that up. And for football, they can live with it. For the others, you know, here's the question. How would you feel if USC and UCLA only had joined the Big Ten for football? Would that be more acceptable? Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
I'd be totally fine with that.
Yeah.
Well, no, I would hate it from a tradition standpoint.
Sure.
But I wouldn't be having the beefs that I have right now. None at all. Because again, football, you play 1 day a week. Now, what I would say is I would want the league to be careful about like not having them on short turnarounds for travel. Like, look, if they play a road game on a Saturday, don't have them go play a Friday night, Thursday night road game the next week as well. Right. So like if they're going to play like a Friday, because I know there's some talk of like, playing some Thursday games, some Friday games, whatever. Some of these teams have had like Sunday, Monday games on Labor Day. Just make sure you're smart about what you sandwich around it. That would be my only ask.
Sure.
Because in 1 year, like every other year, those LA teams are going to have a really short trip at least every other year.
So there will be 4 times that you're leaving the time
that
zone
particular
to go
year.
Play. Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
And is it even? I mean, because it'd be 9 conference games. You're most years playing 4 road, and then that 1 year. So it may only be like 3 or 4.
Yeah,
because you'd have your other non-conference. Hey, look, we're going to play Stanford in our non-conference on the road this year. I mean, you know what I mean? Something like that.
Something close. Yeah.
So it's only 3-4 times, maybe 5 at the most, where you're actually doing that travel.
Sure.
So I'd have no problem with that. Oh well, from the aspect of what we're arguing about here.
Right. From the well-being of the other, from the Olympic sports, is
correct.
What I call them, right? From the
correct.
Other sports.
I would hate it from a tradition standpoint. I don't like the fact that you're ripping all those rivalries away. And like, I hate the fact that Nebraska joined the Big Ten. It's not ideal travel, but I mean, they're playing in Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Those aren't as bad. But when you start getting a conference where you have one team in Piscataway, New Jersey, and 2 other teams in Los Angeles, it's like, what are we doing here?
That's crazy.
Like, this is silly. So no, I wouldn't have as much of an issue with it. If it was just for football, right? I wouldn't. From none of this other stuff we just said, none of that would matter to me. It wouldn't matter as much to me. I care about it because it's silly. Number one, that they're doing this. I think it's silly that like Arkansas is in the SEC. They're not in the eastern part of the country, guys. Have anyone ever looked at a map? Is there anything southeastern about Missouri? Anything at all? Right? I mean, Texas is southeast of what? Alaska or Washington, Oregon. right? Like they're in the Southeastern Conference. The Big Ten has 16 teams. Like we've lost all sanity. Like words mean nothing anymore in sports when it comes to money. Who cares what this word actually means? We're just going to do this anyway because we're going to get paid.
Right. How many people do you think you could you could go out on the street and interview who claim they're sports fans and would know what SEC even means at this point? I'm serious. I'm serious.
Yeah.
You know?
And what are they Southeastern of?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like seriously.
Exactly. Right.
So, I mean, like the ACC, like you could look at it and say, at least like, okay, they're all kind of on that East Coast. Right? Like, okay, Pittsburgh's a few hours away from the ocean, but okay, but they're on the Atlantic. They're all kind of like right there. You know what I mean? And like Notre Dame was the one that didn't make as much sense, and it doesn't make as much sense. But even there, it's like, it's not that far away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It makes a lot more sense than Rutgers being in the Big Ten and Missouri being in the SEC.
Right.
I mean,
so. But yeah, no, if you made it a football only thing, Archer, I'd have less of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I would. I'd have less of an issue. But again, this all gets solved if we just put them into sort of this separate the Power Five out, and that's just ultimately what this is going to lead to. And then start negotiating deals as one entity, and then everybody gets the same amount, and then we can kind of go back to conferences making more sense.
Yeah.
And then you're going to spend a lot less money on travel. If teams want to be independent, they can be independent.
So much money on travel,
you know,
Brian.
Do
you think when they're taking all this money from the Big Ten, do you think they realize how much money they're going to be spending on travel?
They have proposals and stuff like that they look at, and you know, and
I mean,
just
think
say,
about
here's what
the
it
baseball
is.
and softball team. They got to play everybody in the conference. Like they play 50 games a year. That's man. I don't know. It's just nuts to me.
Yeah. Yep. So it's annoying. It's frustrating, but yeah, that's my soapbox thing for the day.
Yeah.
For today.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it, Vince.
Okay.
If somebody said everybody go to independent, but see, I don't like that either. Like one of the great things about college football is the rivalries. And this is why I somewhat disagreed with your notion of if you're going to join a conference, I don't want all my rivals being out of conference. I don't want to have to play certain teams out of conference to have rivalries. I like rivalries. I just, you know, I like the notion of, you know, Michigan. Like I don't know if this is true, Vince. You've studied it more. Are they talking about Ohio State and Michigan might not be last game of the year all the time now? Has that been something that's been proposed?
I haven't seen that, but I do think I heard that from
Archer and Antoine, if you guys
back.
can help us out. Have you guys heard this? That like, to me, there's just some things like, you know, are we just going to strip everything that made us love this game
Rivalries
away?
are amazing in college football.
Yeah.
Period.
They're what make football to me. That's what the passion comes from. It's just, you know, it's like, who do you like? Do you love Ohio State more than you hate Michigan?
So we actually had a question yesterday on the show, and I'm interested to get your take on this. I know we want to get out of here, but somebody asked.
I'm good. I'm having fun talking. We just run out of questions.
Somebody asked the question, how would you feel if, for example, you were a Michigan fan, okay, and you played Ohio State in the last game of this? You're 11-0. Both teams are 11-0. Okay, you go and you play them in the last game of the season. Ohio State beats you. Then you got to play them again in the Big Ten championship, and you lose again. You lose twice to your rival.
Talking about that. You and I were talking about that yesterday.
Was that you and me?
Mm-hmm.
Twice to your rival, man. Like that would be gut wrenching.
There would be years where that would happen. Absolutely. Man.
Yeah, that's definitely going to happen.
But to me, I think a lot of time. I mean, how many times have we seen Ohio State and Michigan play each other, and then the response is, "Well, here's a great example. Ohio State last year. What did a lot of Ohio State fans complain about? Well, as the weather was bad, it was this, that, and the other thing. It was, you know, that's why we lost. Well, hey, you get your shot to prove, you know, put up or shut up in a week because you're playing in an indoor stadium.
1 week.
You're playing in Detroit. You're playing in Indianapolis, right? You know, so hey, well, you just had that one better day. Well, okay, fine. You get your shot at a rematch now. I don't necessarily love that, but that's why I don't like the makeup of the new division. The problem isn't where Ohio State and Michigan is playing. It's the fact that you idiots got rid of divisions. That's why it's stupid.
Right.
Because now it's like when Michigan beats Ohio State, you're almost punishing them for beating Ohio State because now they got to go play Ohio State again. And it's just like we're cheapening it. Where, hey, look, you're playing Purdue in the Big Ten championship. Well, that's our reward for beating Ohio State.
Yeah.
Or, you know, Ohio State, you got to go beat Northwestern. That's lame. No, it's not lame because we had to beat Penn State and Michigan to get here. That's our reward for beating Michigan is we get to go play Northwestern in the Big Ten title game. So that to me is more the issue. Is like, hey, here's a thought. Actually have real divisions, and don't be stupid, and don't be greedy, and don't go out and have your Big Ten have 16, 18, 20 teams in it, right? Well, but see, then we can't get this. There's only one argument for expansion of conferences. There's only one. It's money. This is all about money. Name me one reason why you need a big conference of 12, 14, 16, 18 teams other than it's because the TV companies will give you more money.
Yeah.
Give me one reason why. Anybody in the chat, give me one reason why you expand conferences and make conferences bigger other than you're going to make more money from TV deals. There's no other reason to do it.
Nope.
And so everything that I grew up loving about the game, and I know some people don't care and younger people don't care about this, but for me, I care, and it's my show, so I'm going to talk about it because I care about it. But everything that I grew up loving about, almost everything I grew up loving about the sport is being just ripped away from us in a short period of time. Conferences that we had passion for, rivalries that I had passion for. You know, there was a geographic nature to these things. Like, you know, hey, these Big 12, Big 8 and Southwest Conference teams would kind of battle out during the regular season, and then you get a chance to go prove yourself against Notre Dame in a bowl game or against Penn State in a bowl game, wherever the case may be. And there was some, hey, the Big Ten, they beat each other up all year, and then you get a chance in the postseason and bowl games to go, you know, because bowl games don't mean jack anymore. Rivalries are becoming less and less important anymore. You know, being a conference champ, like I grew up in an era where I loved watching Ohio State, Michigan as a fan because whoever won it was most likely going to go to the Rose Bowl. And that was honestly the bigger goal. I mean, like, and that was one of the reasons Bo Schembechler had such a bad record in the Rose Bowl from what I've been told by people that study, is because the objective was so much about beating Ohio State that the Rose Bowl was kind of like, well, you've already accomplished your team's goals this year. And the Rose Bowl was kind of like a consolation prize. But like for Ohio State, I was so disgusted by it last year. When you started hearing these rumblings coming out of Ohio State, like, we'd probably pass on going to the Rose Bowl. Are you serious?
Yeah, terrible.
Like, this is where we are now? The Rose Bowl means nothing to you anymore? And I don't blame them. At first, I was mad at Ohio State. But after that, I was like, but you know what? Why should they care about playing in the Rose Bowl again? Because it doesn't mean anything anymore.
It means nothing.
And we've completely taken that away, because now if you're Ohio State, the only thing that matters is, and that's why I've said the ultimate expansion of the postseason should not be an expanded playoff. It should be going back to the old bowl system and then picking your Final Four after the bowl games. Like, now bowls matter again. Rivalries matter again. Regular season matters again. And it just, we've ripped it all away, man. And you know, kids are opting out of bowl games now. It's like, really? I mean, I understand it
so much,
but I don't like. But I understand it.
I get it. No, my mind
excited
gets
to play in a game that everybody else that matters tells them it doesn't matter.
Sure,
agents tell them it doesn't matter. ESPN tells them it doesn't matter,
and they're right. They don't matter right now, and that's
because of the way that we have explained. Oh, it doesn't matter if you're not playing for a championship. Really?
Right.
The Sugar Bowl doesn't matter. The Rose Bowl doesn't matter. The Orange Bowl doesn't matter unless it's a playoff game. Like, what are we doing to this game that we all love? It's all money. It's all about money. And that's what sickens me about it. We're destroying all what made this game great. Now, listen, when the game was great, there was a lot of flaws in the system.
Sure. Where the
NCAA was making boatloads of money and the players weren't even getting their full cost of tuition covered. Right? So I'm understanding. But see, here's the thing. These TV revenue deals aren't addressing that. They're not taking the $80 million of the year and saying, hey, we're going to give the players half of that. They're not doing that. It's going to the school. When Notre Dame signs a huge TV deal, guess what? That's not all going to the athletic program. That's going to go to fund all these other things that they're doing on campus. Let's be real about that.
Sure.
Right? So those things are broken. That part needed to be fixed. The transfer process pre the portal opening up was broken and needed to be fixed. There was a lot of those things that needed to be fixed, but the game was great. And so what you've done is you've now used those things as an excuse to make more money, cheapen the game, but none of it's really flowing back to the players. If we're being honest about it, it's not flowing back to the players. It's all lip service. And we're expecting ESPN to be the arbiters of truth and justice. And from a reporting standpoint, when they're the primary driver of all this bullcrap.
Right.
So they're going to run stories that are going to make what they're doing in TV bad and wrong and exploitative? Of course they're not. Of course they're not. It's like having a branch of government that's like making like CNN and Fox News like branches of the government. And like they're reporting on the people that pay them money to have jobs. You know what they're not going to do? Go out and find dirt on the people that pay them their money and who their livelihood depends on, right? It's like if Notre Dame paid us, all of our money came from Notre Dame, they would want to tell us what we can and can't do. And it would be silly for us to go out there and write articles saying things that we don't like about, we would become the hype men for Notre Dame. I would never do that. I'm just making a point, right?
Right.
Well, that's what ESPN's news division is. You're not going to go out and write articles about how these TV deals are destroying everything we love about football because you're the freaking ones making the TV deals, right? And so it's just the whole thing is broken. And we're saying, well, the players weren't getting this. Well, they're still not. So what has all this TV money done other than line the pockets of a few people, right? And so I get sick of it. I really get sick of it. I do. And the whole thing makes me disgusted because everything that I grew up loving is just piece by piece being ripped away, and no one's giving me good reasons for it other than just, we're getting paid. I will do this as long as you pay us enough. Like Texas, what's the point of going to the SEC? Give me one good reason other than they're getting paid a lot of money that is going to benefit the student athletes at Texas from being in the SEC. Give me one good reason why it's good for the student athletes to be in the SEC.
Crickets.
Exactly. Give me one good reason why it's good for student athletes for USC to be in the Big Ten. Give me one. You can't find one. You can't. And that's what disgusts me about the whole thing. And so that's my rant. And that's why I wish, if I found out, Elon Musk, left all his money for me, you know what I mean? That I would use all that to fix the things that I'm passionate about. And that's something I'm passionate about. I'd say, okay, I'm going to buy all this. We're going to be under one umbrella. And if you don't want to be part of it, then you can go join all the NCAA teams playing for pennies on the CW network. Okay. But this is what we're doing. And that's what I would do. So yeah, it's kind of a sad way to end the show, Vince, but it is just the direction we're going.
Yeah.
And that's why every time we talk about, what if Notre Dame was like, the whole premise of your question about who would you want your rivals to be in the Big Ten just kind of angered me because I don't want to talk about being in the Big Ten.
Right.
I don't want to be in the Big Ten. It just I don't like it. It frustrates me. But
all right. We're going to end it on that note, everybody. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed
Can we talk about something fun real quick before we go? Is there something happy about Notre Dame's going to have one of the best cornerback tandems of college football this year? How about that? Can we talk about that again?
Talk about the USC women's volleyball team. That's usually a fun topic to talk about. It's right here from Joseph.
All right. I think he was kind of making a different point, but whatevs.
I know. I'm making a joke. All right.
Somebody asked, does the CW network still exist? I only know it exists because there was a report a month ago saying that they were one of the networks that the Pac-12 was in negotiations with.
Poor Pac-12.
I'm like, seriously? First of all, the CW is still a thing. I had that same reaction. Number two isn't that like all the teeny bopper shows?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know any of them, but I know exactly what you're talking about, like the Teen Wolf and all that kind of crap.
Oh, goodness gracious.
All right.
Here's actually, and if you need to go, Vince, you can go, but I want to answer this question.
Okay.
From Ben Tarnowski.
Well, Ben asks, if college football ever did branch off the NCAA, do you think it would still be institution affiliated or would it be independent from schools?
It's going to be hard. I know that there's a push for people to try to take it away from the schools. I think that would be a mistake. I am all for the NCAA. I feel this, Vince, and if you're going to stay, I'd like you to address this. I'm curious your thoughts on it. I would like for the NCAA to go away, but I would like it to be replaced by another governing body.
Sure.
It's kind of like, that would be a political conversation. But if you're going to tell me, hey, we want to get rid of something, and you need to tell me, okay, then cool. Then what are we going to do to replace it with?
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
And so to me, I want to keep these schools. I think the pageantry, the pride of you are a student athlete. I believe in amateurism. I just don't believe in amateurism in the manner in which the NCAA defined amateurism, because it wasn't about amateurism. It was about, we don't want you to have any money. We want to get all the money.
We want to have the power over you.
Right.
Because
and the commissioners and the presidents.
Power.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So to me, I would still want them to very much be associated with the conferences. It's just, I think we need to kind of brand. We already have it. So why don't we reduce it even more? We already have Division I, 1AA, Division II, Division III. Why don't we just kind of take the group of 5 and make them their own thing, and then take the Power 5 and make them their own thing? And if you want to stick with the NCAA over here, that's cool. But when it comes to governing college football and college basketball, we're going to kind of do this over here. Actually, just be college football, because it is such a unique entity. NCAA can worry about all this other crap. You can still run the college basketball tournament. You can still run the NCAA championships, whatever the case may be. We might even give you a little cut of this to help you out with that. But it's going to be about making it a football-only thing. And the byproduct of that is we're going to restore some sanity back to the NCAA, right? Because we're going to completely gut what they are now and get them back to what their original mission was, which is just a way to bring some sort of oversight to college athletics, which is originally what it was supposed to be. If I'm correct on that.
Sure.
So get them back to that and let them plan conference championships or whatever. National championships in these sports that nobody watches on TV anyway. And we're going to run college football over here, and then you can do whatever you want to do with college basketball. But we are going to then have an impact on you, because we're going to bring sanity back to the geographic nature in which these things are broken down. And so if it's one 64, 65 team entity, and we're all kind of basically getting the same money from TV revenue, then there's no need for USC and UCLA to be in the Big Ten. None. And so then go back to it. But at the heart of it is it's restoring the tradition and pride of being a team that we're battling to be who the best team in Texas is. Well, how do you know? You don't play anybody in Texas anymore. It's restoring the tradition of you are part of this institution, and you have these traditional rivalries. So I think at the heart of it should be getting back to where it is more of a part of the schools and the institutions, in my opinion. And we do get back to bringing back the rivalries and the conferences that make sense. So the last thing I would want to do is to separate athletics and football from the institutions. I think that's what makes them unique and what makes them great. And that's what keeps them amateurs. It's the fact that they're still students. We still care about the development aspect of it. We care about the pride of being a student at the University of Notre Dame, not just a football player. Because otherwise, you don't have college athletes anymore. You have a semi-pro league, and so just name them something different. It's the South Bend whatevers, not the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Right.
Because otherwise, why be on campus?
There needs to be oversight, and there needs to be teeth with that oversight. Like, that's my biggest thing. Like, there's rules in the NCAA, but they're like suggestions, because there's no teeth to it. You know what I mean? And so whatever governing body that you have over college football, it needs to have teeth, and they need to be willing to enforce the rules, whatever those rules are. And because they need to clean up the NIL. They need to clean up the geographic issue. There's stuff that needs to be cleaned up, and there needs to be teeth to it.
And
because right now the
uniformity
NCAA doesn't have teeth.
Right.
And none. Uniformity and teeth.
None.
It's
their own dang fault. It's their own dang
Oh,
fault.
absolutely.
Their own dang fault.
100%. Because they didn't want to be the bad guy when it comes to all this stuff. And now it's, what everybody says it, right? It's the wild, wild west when it comes to all this stuff. And there's no going back.
Instead of addressing the real problems that existed. No, there is no going back. It's going to have to become its own thing.
It has to be something new.
Yeah.
Exactly. I completely agree.
Now, it could be going back to what it was meant to be, but it's still going back to what it was meant to be as part of a new entity, I think. You know what I mean, Vince? Like, it's going back to whatever the new entity is. It's to a degree going back to because like people say, well, oversight. Isn't that what the NFL is? I mean, there's a ton of oversight in the NFL.
Absolutely.
Right. So don't say, well,
all the way down to how they have to dress.
Right. I mean, hey, we're not a professional league, or we want to be like a professional league. Okay. Well, the professional leagues, if you tamper, you're losing draft picks and millions of dollars, and people are getting fired. So let's let's do that.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the things that, to me, that the models of the professional leagues that I would take is the uniformity in revenue sharing in that regard, and the uniformity in like there's these are the rules, the cans and can'ts. And the reason that you don't see NFL teams cheating the way college teams is why, Vince. You just nailed it. Why do NFL teams not cheat the way that college teams cheat when it comes to talent acquisition and all that other kind of stuff?
Because they're going to get in trouble and they're going to get stuff taken away, like whether it's money or
major trouble
or whatever. I mean,
and you get fired.
Yeah,
you lose. Not everyone. I mean, Bill Belichick was able to go through multiple. You lose draft picks. You lose millions of dollars.
Right.
And that may not matter to an NFL team because they're bringing in revenue in other types of ways. But to a college team, that's why I've always said, you want to put some teeth to something? Cool. Here's what we're going to do. We can't make a kid ineligible. Fine. Here's what we are going to do, though. You can't make, you can't play in a bowl game. You can't do this. We're going to make you pay X $1 million instead of saying, well, we'll declare these players ineligible. All right, cool. Those kids are gone anyway. We're going to make you forfeit losses. All right, who cares? Everybody knows those games are played. If I go to YouTube and I play that game of Reggie Bush playing against whoever, and I watch the game, guess what? At the end of this game, USC still had more points than the other team.
Right.
I still have video of Reggie Bush holding up the Heisman Trophy. I don't care what you say you did. He's still the Heisman Trophy. Because who was the Heisman Trophy winner that year? Nobody? No, Reggie was. Right. You can say whatever the heck you want. We took it away, blah, blah. Screw you. Make USC pay you $15 million. Don't, you know what I mean? Like, don't say, well, we're going to put you in a bowl ban. So you're punishing the players that had nothing to do with it. Here's what you do. You can play in a bowl game, and we'll pay for all your travel like we do everybody else. You get zero money revenue from that bowl game. Zero. You don't make a dime off that bowl game. But we're still going to let you play it because we're not going to punish the players that are part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Put some teeth to it.
Exactly.
But they don't care. They don't care. That's the whole point, Vince. They don't care. Because if they cared, this would have been fixed years ago.
Absolutely.
And we wouldn't be where we are. You try to be greedy, you-know-whats, for all this time, and Congress protected you. And eventually, the Supreme Court said, you're not protected anymore. And the NCAA ran and hid, like a bunch of cowards, like they've always been. Mm-hmm. And then they whine and cry, well, this is getting out of hand. You did this. You did this. So don't cry and go ask Congress. But see, now we have no choice but to ask Congress because, you've got all these problems in our country, but apparently these state legislatures have enough time to pass NIL bills.
Right.
We don't have functioning roads, and Jackson, Mississippi still, I don't think has clean water, but I'm pretty sure the state of Mississippi has an NIL bill. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hey, got to set our priorities right. You know what I mean? It disgusts me. California's having all these problems. They're having mass population shifts. You have all this crime, all this other stuff rampant in the state, but they got an NIL bill, and they want to darn sure make sure that those football players at UCLA and USC are employees. Right? What are we doing here, man?
Right.
We've completely lost our way. But the last thing that I want to do, Vince, is take these kids away from the schools.
Absolutely.
Because 90-some% of these kids are never going to play professional football.
Right.
I want us to get back to caring more about how we're developing as young people, not less. And this does less. It does less about – it's like this whole stupid spring football league. That is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my life.
You're talking about exploiting kids.
100%.
Wow.
100%.
Because what's the upside of a 4- or 5-star kid playing in one of these leagues or on one of these teams? Yeah. What's the upside? You're not going to get more exposure. You're a 4- or 5-star athlete already. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody that matters knows who you are and what you can do. You're not going to gain a single thing by playing in this league. You know who's going to gain something if they have a couple of 2- or 3-star kids who just go out and ball out or something like that. It's the only people that are going to gain from that.
But those kids are balling out at a 7-on-7 or some camp or something. It's not going to cause them to get hit in the head 1,000 more times.
Oh, there's no positive to this whatsoever. The whole thought process behind this makes no sense. No sense. And if these kids are getting any kind of good advice from anybody, they're going to say, why would you do this?
Screw you. No way. We're not going to let you use us.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you use us.
No.
Absolutely.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
But those are the ideas that we're seeing floated around, not actual reforms that have any benefit to young people at all. It's this crap. How can people that are making money make more money? That's what all
Right.
this is about. There's
Right.
nobody advocating for young people. And the people that are pushing for it are doing stupid things like boycott EA Sports. Like that's the line in the sand you're drawing. That right there. Come on, guys.
Exactly.
It's all silly, man. It's all silly. Anyway, now that is
there we are.
It's just going to be impossible for us to end on a happy.
I know, seriously.
So let's just.
I'm going to church, and I'm looking forward to it. So
I'm going to go mow the lawn, and then I'm going to go to the range. So I'll work out my frustration there.
Just keep it pounded down range.
I do, always. I'm a pretty good shot. You've seen me shoot.
I know, just messing with you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us on this edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast and the mailbag and everything else that we did today. We will be back on Monday. Topic TBA at 1:00. Topic TBA at 6:00 for IB Nation Sports Talk. But please make sure you tune in. Hit that like button. Hit that notification bell. Hit the subscribe button and share with your family and friends.
And D-Troll Hunter, your 6-year-old is correct. I should not have used the word stupid. It's an ugly word. Thank you for sharing that. He is correct. He or she is correct. So, yes, thank you. Thank you.
That is awesome. That is really funny and so true. So on that note, that's Brian. I'm Vince, and we'll talk to you guys next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.